finally tonight we will have a meeting of the City of Urbana City Council's Committee of the Whole. This is our third and final meeting. I know we have a few speakers for public input. If you haven't and you came to speak, fill out a yellow card on the back table and pass it here to the city clerk, Phyllis Clark, who can get it around to me so that you can speak. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Bowersatz.
Here.
Mr. Garrick. Mr. Lewis.
Here.
Ms. Marlin.
Here.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Smythe.
Here.
Ms. Stevenson. Mayor Pressing.
Here.
Thank you. Are there any additions to the agenda? Is there a staff report? Tom? Oh, Mayor, did you have one first? Oh, okay. Go ahead, Tom.
Good evening. This is the first meeting of the month, so we are presenting to you the Economic Development Report, which everyone should have received electronically. Just to highlight a few items, we are working with a new tenant for the former office space at 212 Main Street, so we're working to get that re-tenanted. Staff attended a ribbon-cutting event that was for the first building completed for the Eastland Suites apartments, and there will be future phases of that project. There's a new user in the former Margarita space called La Fiesta, and work is continuing on that space. Facade improvements are substantially complete on Sunnycrest Mall, which is now called Sunnycrest Center. The UBA and the city participated in a ribbon cutting at the opening of the new Heartland Bank on Philo Road, and work has begun on the new Freestar Bank on an outlot in front of Meyer, also along Philo Road. Did want to mention that the Market at the Square in the city of Urbana were recognized in a national publication for farmers markets called Growing for Market. That's both a hard copy publication as well as an online publication. Just to quote a few items, the author says, "In my review of current blogs, I found only a few that appeared to be using the medium to its full potential." This is related to blogging. And the author goes on that one of the best examples is the Urbana, Illinois Market at the Square, and then it gives the address. And then also related to blogging, Twitter, and Facebook, the author says that Urbana's market is definitely a trendsetter in the use of internet technology. It has fully embraced all three of these media, and it has done so effectively. So we're receiving national attention for our marketing efforts related to the Market at the Square, and Lisa has also taken that on to the city as a whole related to the city's marketing efforts. So thank Lisa Braultz very much for her work. And then also we just received a supply of spy maps. This is a project that was conducted by the Urbana Business Association. You should all have one in front of you at the dais. We received a number of these because we are an advertiser within this publication, but it's a great publication, and we have plenty of them to have available here at City Hall, and UBA is going to be distributing to businesses throughout the city so that visitors to the city can pick one of these up. They are not to scale, and they're not exactly accurate, but they are a good representation of the city. At that, I'm done, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
One. Yeah, Dennis.
And what was the funding to produce these? It was the advertising itself?
The advertisements are the funding. Actually, UBA, the city, did not pay anything to have this produced. The advertisers pay for the production and the design.
How clever.
Did they solicit businesses in along Philo Road for this?
I believe most of the businesses solicited were in the downtown area. If you look at the map, it does have a downtown focus.
Yeah.
It does include Philo Road, and it does mention some of the shopping centers along Philo Road, but I'm not sure if the designer actively solicited businesses along Philo Road.
Can we include some next version of this map?
We can certainly work with the designer and the company that printed them up. We did work with them to review some of what they had done, but the city was really just an advertiser in this. We didn't have a lot of authority as far as what went in and what didn't go in, that type of thing, because it was designed and printed through advertising dollars, and the city was really just one advertiser within it. But we can work to highlight other areas in the future.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Tom. Other staff reports? Yes, I think we have a proclamation from Mayor Preston.
I have a proclamation by the mayor of the city of Urbana. It's actually signed by Charles A. Smythe, Mayor Pro Tem, but that's okay. Whereas, in conformance with the Constitution, the U.S. Census Bureau will conduct the next decennial census in the year 2010, and whereas political representation to the U.S. House of Representatives, state legislatures, and local governments is determined by decennial census results, and whereas the city of Urbana recognizes the equal importance of each residence in the 2010 census count, and whereas the city of Urbana has agreed to be one of 6,425 government entities in partnership with the U.S. Bureau of the Census, and whereas the city of Urbana understands that its primary role in this partnership is to participate in a complete count committee, which will ideally include the following subcommittees: government, education, media, religious, community-based organizations, business, recruiting, and special housing. And whereas the city of Urbana is partnering with the Champaign County Complete Count Committee, coordinated by the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission, to ensure that everyone is counted. Now therefore I, Laurel Lunt Pressing, Mayor of the city of Urbana, Illinois, hereby proclaim full support for and participation in the 2010 census through participation in the Champaign County Complete Count Committee. We want everybody to be counted so we can keep upgrading our road signs on our population. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, any other staff reports tonight? None? Then let's have approval of our minutes from the June 22 meeting. First, any corrections? Was that a motion to approve? Sorry, Charlie? Second, Diane? Anything else? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, those are approved. Next, we have public input time. There are two people who wanted to speak to the Committee of the Whole here at the beginning of the meeting tonight. The first is Matt Snyder, and then the second is Laura Huth and Cheryl Middow, who are on deck. So first, Matt Snyder, if you want to come on up and grab a seat here. The microphone is the little black thing. Yep, if you state your name and address for the record, and tell us what's on your mind.
Sure. My name is Matthew Snyder. I live at 305 West Illinois in Urbana. I'm also the owner of Community Resource, which is a recycling company, a commercial recycling company based out of Urbana, but not limited to Urbana in terms of service. I wanted to thank you for letting me speak tonight, and I wanted to talk a little bit, very briefly, about the commercial recycling information that you guys were soliciting. We do a fair amount of small-scale commercial recycling. We do some real large stuff, too. If anybody's looking for the Chef Boyardee plant, I can tell you we do their recycling in Pennsylvania. But we do some small places also in town. And I wanted to ever so briefly mention the fact that I think that for the downtown portion, this is a great idea. I think my experience in trying to get a multi-tenant building to recycle always tends to come to a dead end when you get to an economic issue. Somebody's got to figure out who's going to pay the bill. It doesn't usually work real well, and then they go upstream to the landlord, and then that's usually where it ends up dying. So in that kind of a setting, I think it's a great idea. I'm a little concerned when it extends out to standalone businesses, or sort of as a tangent to that, where you draw the line on what a small business is. So the size of the businesses eligible for participation is going to be something I'll be very interested in following, because, for instance, we do Carl's Recycling, and if all of a sudden they become a small business, I'll start to freak out. We've got some downtown businesses that we recycle, heel to toe, places like that. And that seems to work out nicely. But again, those are not as small as a 1 or 2 person law office. So I think we will be more than happy to provide input. That is, my company will. I'd love to, without going into another long round of commercial recycling meetings, I'd love to, if anybody has questions, answer those. And if it gets to the stage where a bid is solicited, I'm sure we will discuss bidding on it.
Any questions for Matt?
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Okay, next then we have Laura Huth and I think it's Cheryl Midda. I hope I pronounced your name right. Come on up and grab a chair here. They're here to address us about the Do Good Open House. So tell us your names officially for the record and what's on your mind.
Sure. I'm Laura Huth. I'm the founder of Do Good Consulting.
And I'm Cheryl Midda, Organizational Development Specialist with Do Good Consulting.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to address the council. We'll be brief tonight. We're here to share some exciting news with you. We have an invitation, actually, for you. This month, one of your downtown businesses, Do Good Consulting, turns 3. And for those who don't know about Do Good, we specialize in the needs of small to mid-sized nonprofit organizations, helping them with fundraising, strategic planning, marketing, developing volunteer programs, hiring staff, etc. Over the last 3 years, we've worked with over 4 dozen organizations here in the community, helping them grow stronger and do their important work even better. Volunteerism and community service is integral to what the Do Good team does. In the first half of '09 alone, our team, and there's 11 of us in all, have donated over 100 hours in our time, expertise, and energy to some of the local nonprofits, many of whom names you'll recognize, such as Cunningham Children's Home, Crisis Nursery, the Eastern Illinois Food Bank, the Champaign-Urbana Theater Company. There are more. We estimate this is a value input to the community of about $10,000. The work we've done to help build better, we've also done work to build better, stronger schools and local businesses. We worked with Peter Fox to secure a $10,000 grant to overhaul facilities at Thomas Paine Elementary School, and also secured funding to bring new technology to Wiley School students. We've worked with the UBA to conduct a community-wide survey of business and residents to help that organization form its vision and mission for the future. And we were instrumental in helping to bring Mervis Industries Advantage Recycling Facility, a multi-million-dollar facility that will open in North Urbana in 2010. We also worked with Common Ground Food Co-op just across the street from here to open their new store in Lincoln Square Village. We're here tonight to invite you to an open house that we will be hosting on Wednesday, July 15th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. The event will be held at the Do Good Consulting office, which is at 201 West Green in downtown Urbana. And this is the good part here. We are going to be giving away free ice cream. Free ice cream from 11 to 2 Wednesday, July 15th, while supplies last. And we also will be having back massages, little mini back massages, and then for the kids, some temporary tattoos. With some adults, you might want some of those too. But we'd like to invite you and the public to join us in celebrating 3 years of service to our community. And I encourage you to choose to have lunch in downtown Urbana on Wednesday, and then join us for ice cream afterwards. Hope to see you then.
Thanks. Sweet. Okay, is there any other public input? Okay. With none, then we will turn to to the first topic, our presentation about the Urbana-Champaign Big Broadband UC2B project. I think we have Pete Resnick here, and also it looks like Peter Folk from our Broadband Access Committee, a subcommittee of the Cable Commission. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Gehrig sent some email the other week and said that you all had some additional questions. Ms. Marlin sent quite the list of questions, yes. And Mike Smeltzer, who could not be here tonight, he's over at the Unit 4 School Board. I brought Peter instead, given that he's another of the techno geeks on the Broadband Access Committee, to answer any questions. And I figure I'll just give you a quick update, and then any questions that Ms. Marlin might want to point out for the rest of the group by way of answers, or needing further explanation, or any of you for that matter, I'd be happy to answer. To let you know, the application process was released by the NTIA of the Department of Commerce. The applications are due August 14th. We are busily working away at that. We have writing teams from the Broadband Access Committee, so each member of the Broadband Access Committee is heading up a team that is writing up information on a particular topic area. Peter is writing up on business and entrepreneurship. Mike is writing up on the technical aspects. There's an operations team. There's an education team and a few others. Those are input into the applications. The applications, it turns out, are very limited. They are long, there are 20-odd pages of application, but very specific questions, not a whole lot of time for essay answers. So we're using the writing teams to provide input into the applications, and for further questions, which will come up September 14th, so a month after the applications are submitted, they will decide on who is going on to round 2, at which point Q&A will occur. Questions will go to the governor to ask which projects are worthy of approval, et cetera, and there will be open public input. We will have 30 days beyond that to respond. Awards are to be granted on November 7th, according to the current schedule. So this is all happening rather quickly. The applications are being filled out. There are 2 sets of applications. There are actually 4 applications total for 4 different projects. The way other folks have divided things up, there are the middle mile, the actual wiring of the towns themselves, the last mile getting to the door, the community technology centers, and then the sustainability of the broadband project, that is, the marketing, the business model, et cetera. Evidently, different communities are doing just one of these things. Obviously, having 4 different applications makes it more of a pain for us because there's lots of answers that are the same between the applications. The middle mile and the last mile application is currently being filled out by Mike Smeltzer. The CTC and sustainability applications are being worked on by Professor Al-Kalamat. Both of them are at the university, and they are working with the Grants and Contracts Office there. If the legal staffs of both cities are able to work out the intergovernmental agreement before all this happens, we may approach this differently, but August 14th is just not that far away, and so we will probably allow the university to file the application and go from there. From there, I can answer any questions you might have with specifics with regard to the project that have come up since we last talked.
Mayor?
Well, I'm interested, obviously, in the long-term financial impact to the city. So you're saying we have a professor at the university. Is he working with the city financial staff?
Yeah, he is leading up the writing of the application forms. But yes, as far as I understand it, he is getting together with the city folks that are both on the committee itself, on the Broadband Access Committee, and is going to start working with the staff. I don't know at what level he's at yet. We have just gotten started on the application process. The intention is to work with both cities and business leaders to figure out what kinds of models of operation and how we can make the funding sustainable on an ongoing basis. One thing I should mention is we are talking very much about this application process. Do keep in mind the Broadband Access Committee was formed before this stimulus package happened to us. And I was reminded tonight, this afternoon, we had a meeting of the committee, that part of the purpose of the Broadband Access Committee is to look to how is broadband deploying in the cities over the long term. We plan to continue doing that. We've been very caught up in this particular application process, but we plan to look at how this can be sustainable into the future and beyond just serving these underserved areas that the broadband proposal, the big broadband proposal, is now applying for.
Diane?
Sticky notes, which is why I started just writing the questions down. I appreciate the answers that Mike sent, but I still cannot grasp what exactly you are obligating the city of Urbana to do in this grant in the short term and then in the long term. I've seen the figure of $567,000, which would be our portion of the local match to build the infrastructure. But then what comes after that? And does this legal entity, are we on forming a temporary legal agreement, kind of the dating phase, and then if we get the grant and we think we want to proceed with it, then we can go on to a more permanent relationship? What exactly are you asking the
So,
city to be responsible for?
so right now, what we're doing is, let me answer there's two parts there, which are the legal entity issue and the ongoing issue, financial issues. As far as the legal entity, the writing team, which I believe is being headed up by Bill DeJarnette, is working on the operations end of things. Right now, their discussions with the legal staff from both Urbana and Champaign and the university is looking at a METCAD kind of model, just because that's what they're used to. This would be an intergovernmental agency of some sort that would be responsible for the actual operation, the actual installation and ownership of the physical plant. Now, that would be an ongoing relationship. I don't know right now from legal, I have not heard what the outcome is, what state they're in as far as getting some sort of agreement together to present to the city councils. Obviously, that would have to happen and get approved at some point, but that's not required before November 7th. Right? Having the actual entity there ready to go is not going to be required until the grant is received and the city councils say, yes, we want to take the money. So as far as how that intergovernmental agreement works out, that's an ongoing process. We expect there to be something before the grant needs approval, but we are not, or at least something set up and ready to go. I don't think anybody on the committee is expecting something to be in place before application time in a couple of weeks. Now, as far as the financial, the expectation in the models that we are working with hope that between monies that can be charged to people using the service, and there's lots of questions about who will be charged and that are still being worked on, whether lower income people can have no or very minimal charge, whether people with more income can be charged more. We're still working that out, in addition to whether service providers who will provide the actual service on the network will be paying monies, that in the end that will be a sustainable model that will support the operation and ongoing maintenance of the network. I think, as Mike mentioned in his message to you, the maintenance of the rings, of the backbone, if you will, of the network is not significant. The real significant expenditures are the maintenance of what's going to people's houses, the electronics on the ends of the fibers, and potentially the service to the homes. Hopefully, service to the homes is going to be provided by external service providers.
Will we have a choice to stop after we build the middle mile as a city?
Will you have a choice? I believe...
Because it seems to me the fiber backbone is the basic infrastructure. And
correct.
Then, which would be the first part, and the basis, the thing that everything else hinges on. So
right.
Would we have to form a utility if we built just that much?
Well, I'm trying to figure out which the cart here is and which the horse is.
Well, so am I, actually.
I believe that the applications are going to be written in such a way that there might be some dependencies, and so come November 7th, I'm guessing that someone's going to say, well, we're willing to grant you this, should you accept it, if you're going to do this middle mile along with all of these other projects. Now, it may be that because there's 4 separate grants, they're going to grant them completely independently with no indication that, well, if you're going to take on the middle mile grant, you better take on the last mile too and all of this other stuff. I don't know, but I can imagine the case being that there are interdependencies. I don't know if you've read any more in the application that would indicate one way or the other.
I believe that the applications will be viewed independently by the NTIA. And I think that actually what you answered is sort of the opposite of what Diane asked. That the NTIA can certainly choose to grant only the middle mile or only the last mile, and then we'll be, well, we're we don't know what to do at that point.
Right.
But your question, I think, was whether the city could choose, well, we've built the middle mile, can we now not build the last mile because it's not looking so good? I think that probably on November 7th, you're going to be asked to decide which of the projects you're going to take on, and you're going to have to choose at that point. So it will not be feasible to, on November 7th, say, we're going to start off with this middle mile, and then, a couple of years from now, we'll decide whether to keep up with the last mile. They'll want you to say whether you're taking the money or not, because if you're not taking the money, they'll use it for something else.
So how much does it cost to build the rings, in your best guesstimate?
That is the object of some debate, depending on your definition of those rings. Mike's figure, I believe, last time I heard it, was $15 million. And that's, you would do 20% match of that, and the other people would do, the NTIA would do the rest.
And that actually comports roughly with what I've heard from a couple of other communities. They were talking, I know Lafayette, Louisiana was saying about half their money, give or take, went into the backbone. The other half was getting the last mile. So that's a little less. That's a little more optimistic about what the backbone will take. But I don't know the specific technical differences between what Lafayette did and what we're doing.
This backbone would actually be a sufficiently large backbone for the entire community. So if the project went through to completion with the entire cities covered, then it would be significantly less than a third or a half.
Diane, go ahead.
I have a couple more.
No, yeah, go
So
right ahead.
if you don't raise enough money in the local match to get to the $30 million total figure, and you maybe can raise 15 to 20 million, will you then prioritize, or will you just build some of the rings but still do some to the home? I mean, is that a requirement to go to the house?
I'll go back to what Peter said earlier. If come November 7th, we haven't raised the money that we applied for to match, I think we're going to have to say to them, this is all we're going to be able to put up, and then whether or not they will accept our conditions on the grant that have changed, I don't know.
I have not read enough about how they're going to, when they're going to want the actual money,
for the
cashier's
match.
check, to know whether, to know when you'll have to have the money. I would say that if it came to the point where we did not think that we could raise a 20% match for whatever the total amount we're wanting, we would, of course, have to prioritize. I think that there are at least 3 different worthy projects that it would be very hard to prioritize. So I don't know how we'd come out of that decision process.
And I think I could add to that from my conversations with Mike. He is working to get commitments for the full local match before the application goes in mid-August, so that if we can't find enough match money between governmental entities, the private businesses, the hospitals, all the banks, all the people that are supporting the project, then we would apply for a slightly smaller project and trim some of the neighborhoods out of the last mile portion of the project. If we could only find enough match to support a $30 million or a $25 million project, at least in Mike's descriptions to me, he said, well, then we'll scale our application back. But that we really do want those commitments from all the local entities by August, which is why he's out talking to the school district tonight, so that we know what size of project we have local commitments to match for. And we pick a project where we can support 20% and the federal request will be for 80%.
Now, there's a little bit of a complexity that adds, because for example, the NTIA is unlikely to give us money to just do the rings because of what it says in the grant about what kinds of things they want to fund. They're much more likely to give us money for the last mile component, but you can't do the last mile component without the rings. So it's there's some sort of decision process that has to go there, and it's going to be if we can't find the full local match, it will be hard. We'll be trying to read the minds of the NTIA people to some extent.
Your looks of concern go around the room at the Broadband Access Committee every time we meet.
This is like trying to grab a cloud. There's nothing to hold on to.
I would say that I'm a fairly nuts and bolts kind of guy, and I agree with you. I think that luckily, because there is an application, a deadline that's coming up, a lot of the amorphous nature of this project will be cleared up in the next probably 2 weeks. I think we're finally coming down to the point where people are having to make actual decisions on things instead of leaving them open to whatever options they would like to imagine.
Does the council sign off on the application before it goes in?
I believe so. If it looks like the legal agreements are getting together, the university has said that they're perfectly willing to make the application themselves if that's what it comes down to.
And the schedule I've heard for that is that the legal agreements, and Ron, correct me if I'm wrong, could come to council the first meeting in August, like August 3rd, depending on how the meetings between Urbana city lawyers and Champaign city lawyers go. So that could come to committee July 27th in just a few weeks. And during those 2 weeks, when Mike and others would be here again, by that point, a lot more of these decisions will have been made. The text will be in final versions, ready to be submitted off to the government. Ron?
You're partially right. We are currently working. It's Champaign's legal counsel, me, and counsel from the university are working on an agreement. Fred Stavins is currently attempting a draft of that document. Because of some of the, again, amorphous nature of this, it's probably difficult to come up with a final draft of something, but it is going to mimic the MetCAD model that seems to work well. What we've been told is that the university, or what we discussed, I should say, was that the university would be making the application, but that the municipalities would be probably doing more of the boots on the ground work, infrastructure work, because we'd be more able to do that in a more facile manner than the university can. University is kind of like a big ship trying to do projects like this, and we're able to move a little quicker. That's my understanding. And currently what we're going to be meeting, in fact, this week, this Wednesday, to continue our discussions on creating this document and how it's going to look and so on and so forth. The dates, I cannot promise those dates.
Right.
I just can't make that commitment, but we're trying.
Yep.
Diane, do you have any other questions? Okay.
I will say that with regard to the amorphous nature of this, yes, the application process is going to solidify a lot of this. You should keep in mind that we install the backbone, we install the last mile. Let's say we get the money to do that. And then, heavens to Betsy, we fall on our faces and are unable to sustain this. That would be horrible, absolutely horrible. But we would end up with a bunch of fiber in the ground that we wouldn't be able to pay for the use of. That would be very bad, but that, I think, is where the liability would end. Obviously, the business plans that are being worked on in these writing groups are coming up with how we would be able to sustain it over the long term, but I don't think Urbana ends up liable except for the initial investment.
The initial 500-some-thousand.
Which is serious. It would be horrible to do such a thing without solidifying a business plan that made sense for long-term sustainability, and stupid. But, I mean, that's what we're talking about. It's an initial investment to try and get the infrastructure for a business plan that we're honestly in the middle of working out.
Yeah. Well, these all stem from the concern about the long-term financial liability.
Right.
And the completely open-ended nature of this thing.
And again, you will not have to make a decision about whether you think, as a city council, we've got a sustainable long-term plan until November 7th rolls around at the earliest, right? So you need to have those plans in hand and make sure that you're convinced they're sustainable and you want to throw your $500,000 at this at that time. And it is our expectation that that's what you will see.
And you're making those plans?
The Broadband Access Committee, the writing teams that we have set up are working on those plans, and the applications that are being filled out will include whatever we can at the time when August 14th rolls around.
Okay.
Dennis, I saw you had a hand up too. Do you still have questions?
Yeah, they're not quite as deep or serious, I guess. As I read this, it sounded like after the initial spine work or the basic lines were laid out, then the discussion was the focus on the rings, and it sounded like the grant was especially geared to bring those low-income housing areas access to the internet and to the broadband world of computer and internet interaction. And so the initial ring that was discussed was the Bradley Avenue North Champaign area ring, and then from that would be building out. Okay, that makes sense. You're addressing the needs of the grant proposal and the intent. Of course, we know that there's going to be other communities that are going to be waiting to be serviced eventually, maybe even more eagerly, because they're already looking to access, this wonderful quality right away. So my question is, sort of like, what is are we working under a timeline for installation? If we get this grant, do we have a very long? Are they very patient with the installation process and the fulfillment of this ring cycle, or are we going to have to put a lot of fiber in pretty quickly, ring by ring by ring?
It'll be a there's a lot of work to do in the time allotted. All of the work has to be completed by the end of 3 years. 67% of the work has to be completed within 2 years, and it's a lot of work to do. Part of Mike's original goal was to make it so that it was doable within that time frame, and I don't know whether he's kept to that. He luckily has a very conservative idea of the construction season for fiber optics. Your own Bill DeJarnette has put duct in the ground in December and fiber in the ground in January. So the construction season is actually quite long, and so we probably have about 30% more time than Mike is budgeting for in his plan. That said, the rings, which again are not something that the actual grant request talks about funding, are a lot of that. I think it's almost 100 miles of rings all told. And
so the ring concept was our concept of how to achieve this grant.
Yes,
it's a good concept. It's interesting.
It's looking towards our goals as a community from the Broadband Access Committee of what we want to do with internet access in the committee as a whole. I mean, not the committee, the community as a whole, not so much focusing directly on the requirements of the NTIA. And we're hoping that we can put together an application that is convincing and honest, of course, that includes the things that the NTIA wants and also components that we want for the future development of broadband in this community.
And when Peter talks about the requirements and the desires of the NTIA, remember, The legislation was pretty clear, but pretty general about what kinds of projects were envisioned. The NTIA rules are significantly more limiting than the legislation, I think, anticipated. So obviously the kind of project we're talking about, the rings to connect up the public institutions, to connect up large commercial institutions, and to get it to areas where we want to do the last mile are quite necessary. Mm-hmm. That said, the rings are not envisioned by the NTIA rules.
Yes. Then I have two other thoughts or questions for you. So it's going to be the city or the consortium between the cities, municipalities are going to perhaps accept this grant, and there's going to be work to be done, and the thinking and the planning will be done by the university. And I mentioned the Library Science School, GISLIS, and other organizations on campus being part of that structure, which is fine. And then you were saying that the city would be probably doing more of the roll up your sleeve, get the shovel out kind of installation part of it. Does this plan involve at all major corporation companies or our cable provider currently, or is this completely free from those interactions?
The cable provider, and if you count AT&T, the two cable providers, are not involved in this at this point. Mm-hmm. Big companies, there are folks who are interested in getting access for their businesses. We're in discussions with hospitals and banks in town that are interested in being part of this and are going to pay into that 20% match. But that's not what you're talking about.
No, I'm just wondering about the process of putting cable in. So we're not going to be using these other companies as cable layers or anything like that.
No, the cables, the fibers that we're talking about are going to be laid in the ground, not hung on the poles, as most of the copper cable plant is today. And we may be using similar portions of the right-of-way to do that, but we're not planning on using their fibers, their cables.
Or their expertise or anything like that?
No,
okay.
Not at this point.
The last question is, it sounded like then once these were in, for sustainability reasons, there would be a necessity for having a subscriber fee. And it talked about perhaps a $10 fee or something like that a month. So if I read that correctly. And so I was sort of wondering, yeah, that was on page 10. So I was wondering then how this would work out if we envisioned making the final connections to the door in these areas where there is a challenge financially already, and of course you have to pay for what you get, but are these people who are having perhaps neighborhoods where the general median income is of such that perhaps people may have to choose whether they actually take a connection to broadband services or pay for medication or something. So my question is, of course, we'd like everybody to be connected, but there's going to be some practical, personal issues that come up for connectivity. And is there going to be thoughts about having assistance money for connection when it comes time to make the last connections for some of these communities?
I think you have just summed up the biggest challenge that we have yet to conquer.
The operations team, which Peter has been attending the meetings of, mm-hmm. is working on this question in particular. It's the one that's being wrestled with. We would, of course, love to have the fees from providers who are going to use the network and fees from other users who are not as low income make up the cost and make that cost to low income folks minimal. Mm-hmm. How to accomplish that is the thing that is being tackled.
This then I have to ask, I guess, and this is just, I'm going to put this out. Then I wonder, because this is a physical, this project has to do with physical structure and infrastructure, and so I wonder then if in the future, for the next year or something, CDPG grant money couldn't be used because that supports physical and upgrades for certain areas of the community that have been targeted as low income and potentially could be receiving grant assistance from the city. So I'm just wondering if possibly that's a thought that might be looked into. Staff may have some thoughts about that. If that's a problem, we might find a solution.
Did I hear you say you want to give us more money?
I'm just saying that there might be sources that are federal money that support
I think that
infrastructure improvements.
I don't think that we feel that it's feasible to ask for any more money than the 20% match that we've asked for right now in the time that we have on this grant. As an ongoing sustainability thing, as a way of getting it to the rest of the community, as a way of making it free for low-income people, or make it so that every child has access to broadband. There are all sorts of funding models that we would like to investigate in the future.
And as I mentioned earlier, the Broadband Access Committee does not envision the grant and the building out of the infrastructure as being the end game. We're looking to figure out ways to make a sustainable model ongoing where services could be provided either out of fees that are gotten from the network in other ways or from other grants that we might be able to get.
And actually, I think I'll let the mayor answer here too in a sec, but I think the question really can be posed to city staff who can tell us what different funding sources, whether CDBG is eligible or other funds, could be used for the local contribution on the city's part. So I think in one of the future weeks we'll get to put that question to staff. But Mayor, I know you had a response as well.
Yeah, there's also a cost to not doing this. It's a big cost to not doing it. It's an infrastructure improvement. We figure out ways to pay for roads, motor fuel tax, or there are toll roads. When it comes to MetCAD, I think this community has a great history of cooperation between intergovernmental entities, and MetCAD is a shining example of that. The funding for MetCAD for 911 calls is surcharges on phone bills. So there's lots of ways that we can do it, and we might have to subsidize some people, but I think it should end up being some sort of a utility that actually makes money. And MetCAD just lowered their contributions because they had a huge fund balance. So I'm sure that we can work something out.
Charlie?
Well, this is a really big vision, and it struck me that at the same time we started talking about this, Australia announced they're going to do the entire country of Australia with fiber, plus some kind of sophisticated wireless for the outback. So you're looking at billions and billions of dollars being put forward. But the Prime Minister of Australia said this is the 21st century. It is the solution. It's what's needed to move into the 21st century. And you've got an entire country, a major country, focused on doing something of the scale that we're trying to do locally. I would imagine that with the talent we have in this community, the history of cooperation on some of these big ticket items like MetCAD, that we should be able to pull this off, especially since it's very clear the university is in this as a very, very willing partner and taking a leadership role. So they know it's their future too. If we do want to be the Silicon Prairie or whatever, this is what puts us on the map. And so we have to grind through it. And when I first thought about this is we're going to have to take out, if we have to come up with $550,000, it's not going to come out of our general funds because we don't have it. We're going to have to put out bonds or something, and do is it revenue bonds? I think is one of the methods. There's some bonding methods we'll have to tackle to get this done. But we shouldn't let those very important concerns of how to pay for this long-term stop us from putting together a vision and going after grant. Okay? I mean, if we get the grant, especially all 4 pieces, then it will be such a proposal that with such tremendous potential that we've got to give it a try. You've got to have a vision. You've got to take a risk to do something of this magnitude. So I know that this is something that Mike Smeltzer has been dreaming of for at least, well, the entire time I've known him for 15 or 20 years here. The idea of a ring, I'm sure he's, looking forward to being called Lord of the Rings, but this is a vision that he's had for a long time, and I think we should give as much support to it and try as best we can, because I do think it does represent the future. Now, in a more mundane thing, one of the points that's come out in the last couple of weeks, as you see the details of the grants, is the whole issue of what communities qualify, having to get in and surveying this stuff. Brandon and I have been talking about it back and forth. I don't remember as much of my sampling theory as I should, but it's not an easy task. You've got to do it in a matter of weeks. And where are you?
We have someone at the University Survey Research Lab who is designing the survey with our Broadband Access Committee folks, and has assured us that they can design a model such that they get enough of a sampling size. And remember, we have to do this on a census tract by census tract basis. So they're having to come up with a sample for each census tract.
It's finite population.
Exactly,
samples,
because we
sampling,
have to, according to the rules, show that 40% that there is less than 40% service in any given area for broadband currently. Yeah. We believe, given the income, Mike has done a review of what the income level versus deployment of broadband. We believe that given those census tracts, we're going to be under the 40%. We don't know for sure.
He sent around some maps last night, this morning, on that. I guess one of the things that comes to mind for me on that is how you're defining access. I mean, just because somebody has a cell phone, that doesn't necessarily give them broadband access.
It actually depends on which cell phone provider they have.
Okay, and
if they have...
But those are really expensive plans and so on.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so, I mean, how can you even consider those?
Well, because that's what the legislation defines.
I mean, if they show up at my door and my little card is paid for by my company at $60 or something a month, if one of the houses in that community gets surveyed and they have one of those cards in their computer, I very much doubt they do, that will count as broadband access. But again, a $60 plan is probably, for a single computer in the home, is probably not in the finances of most folks in these areas. I think so.
Well, also a 3G iPhone counts as broadband access.
Right. So if you have an iPhone, if you've purchased an iPhone,
from certain carriers,
mm-hmm.
not from AT&T, from the other ones that are available somehow. It's pretty complex, and that's why the survey has actually turned out longer than they expected it to be, because there are lots of different ways that you can get broadband without really knowing that you maybe have.
Yeah, well, I guess, given the deadline, how are you going to get the numbers?
The SRL has said that, given the deadline, we're going to send out folks door to door, and we are drumming up volunteers and interns to do so. And apparently, the folks who are in communication with the SRL have some people in mind who are available to send out to do such service.
I have one of those bodies too. I'll send
okay.
Any other questions? I think if I can summarize, there were 4 big questions I heard that we want to pose to you all and to Mike and to city staff the next time we talk about this. I think the four are, and tell me if I've missed any, because I want to be sure we do get all the answers before we would actually take action on any of these. First, to know the very specific scope of what will be built and the specific operation plan. Second, I think to know the long-term sustainable business model. Third, and this is a question for city staff, the particular financial plan for Urbana's contribution. And finally, for us to just receive a copy so that we could review the final grant submission, the maps, and the pros. I think those are the four things that, from all the comments tonight, if those were brought back to us, we'd have our questions answered. Is there anything else that would be helpful to any of you? Charlie?
I was just going to suggest keeping this as a topic for every meeting between now and grant submission so that we can take it up at a moment's notice as things come up.
Yeah, maybe we can play it week by week. I know I definitely don't want to overtax you all and Mike Smeltzer as you're writing things as well, so I don't want to automatically assume that you all would come back every week, but I know we talked about the end of July and the first week in August, and you all should feel free, if there are important things you need from us, to contact me. I'm happy to continue to sort of be the go-between with scheduling things, and if we have questions or things that we need, we'll definitely be in touch too. We can put things on agendas any week if it's important to discuss. So.
And I will say I'm going to be out of town on business for the next 3 weeks.
Okay.
But we have plenty of folks on the committee who are. We can drum up the right people. Feel free to send me email, and we will get someone to answer questions here whenever you need.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just want to reinforce that. If you want somebody at your meeting, simply ask. Mike may be busy, but there are lots of other people.
Okay, great. And are there any other questions for council members that, other than the four I listed, would be helpful? That's a good start. Okay, that's a lot of work right there, isn't it? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
Thanks
Thank
very
you
much.
for your time.
Good evening. Next tonight, we will have Public Works to give a presentation for us about stormwater utility concept. So we have Bill Gray, the Director of Public Works, Brad Bennett here, Gail Jameson. Good evening. Bill, why don't you take it away here?
Thank you. Okay, first of all, in all my years with the city, I don't think we've ever talked about utilities twice in one night, but this is a different type of utility. It's actually utility, technically it does exist as we know it in the ground in the city of Urbana and virtually every city in the United States. What we wanted to do tonight is to sensitize the council a little more to really what is involved with stormwater. And what is bringing this more to light is that there are more regulations that are being imposed, especially in the area of the quality of water that we discharge, whether it be from our front yard or off the parking lot or into our streams and rivers, etc. And tonight's intention was really just one of information and education so that you, the community at large, really get a larger understanding and greater understanding of what the Public Works Department, and specifically in operations and in engineering, which impacts those two divisions the most, what's involved in their responsibilities. And as we go through this presentation, you're going to see what all is involved. And I think the one point that we want to make in this whole presentation is that this is a very large investment that the city has made through the decades, for the last 100 years, but it's a utility that is woefully underfunded. So let me start. First of all, we do have an inventory of our systems, and I think most of you are very familiar with sanitary sewer systems. You're aware, if you're a homeowner in town, you do receive a sewer benefit tax. There's also a sewer benefit tax that the sanitary district charges. And just to do a comparison, what facility do you think might be larger or more valuable to the city? Well, technically, it's a storm sewer system. We have more miles of pipes in the ground. We have more appurtenances, which I call, more specifically, are inlets and manholes. 7,763 compared to a measly 2,216 manholes in the sanitary sewer system. The pipe diameters range from anywhere from 6 inch to 120 inches. And I think that might be the Kohler Avenue, which is a large tile that dumps to the boneyard. It literally goes underneath the Schnucks parking lot area. Then we have sanitary sewers, in contrast, that are usually much lesser in diameter. But to be fair, we're really on the collector side of sanitary sewers. There are larger diameter sanitary sewers, but those are called interceptor sewers. And the sanitary district is the one that has responsibility, that owns and maintains, replaces those. But when you look at the total investment, I think conservatively, this is a $129 million investment that we have in the ground for storm sewers. And sanitary sewers are over $100 million too, so it's no small investment that's been made, at least if you were to replace it in today's dollars. The funding source is just general revenues, and really it's a stretch, but we almost to the penny have about $371,000 in this current fiscal year's budget is what funds what you're going to see in the next few slides. In contrast, the sewer benefit tax provides $1.45 million. Well, we do have a map, and this is extremely small scale, but we do have a CAD drawing and really a GIS drawing of the storm sewer system in Urbana. And it covers essentially the entire limits of the city. Our program includes a lot of things. Includes, obviously, the storm sewer pipe, manholes, inlet repairs, replacements, ditch grading and mowing. We do have one fairly large pump station, which is the Vine Street station, which will be under construction here very soon, in the coming weeks, I understand.
Actually, starting on Thursday.
We'll be starting this Thursday, so you'll see some activity there. There's a lot of pipe, manhole, and inlet cleaning, Boneyard Creek inspection and maintenance, regional detention facilities we have responsibility for, hazardous sump pump discharge elimination program, and then responding to citizens. And we've had a fair amount of rain this year, and we've had a lot of calls as a result of those rain events. Pictures that just kind of describe a little bit of what we do. This is a good example of repair. This happens to be on Broadway Avenue, just south of University Avenue. That was a year or two ago. It was near the Boneyard. Vine Street Pump Station, this is the station that will be getting upgraded, but here it's in action, discharging, literally pumping water from the underpass out a flume or a sluiceway, if you will, to the, which is by the Carter's Furniture, to the Boneyard. Here we have a crew. This is one of our trucks. It's called a Vactor. It's a cleaning and a vacuum truck, and they're cleaning storm sewers. Here we have an inspection that's done annually. Brad and Bennett, I'm sorry if I should have done introductions first, but Brad Bennett, Gail Jameson. Brad is our civil engineer, chiefly in charge of all our drainage and stormwater work, and this fellow here is named Brad Osterberg. So we now have Brad and Brad working for us here.
It's a little confusing.
And this is actually, we do not only walk the Boneyard, but we do the saline now too. And every year, both Brads come up with a report, and there's always erosion or different types of activities that are defined that need to be addressed. Here's one of our regional detention facilities that we're in charge of. This is up by the Holiday Inn Express, or the National Center of Teachers of English, Interstate 74 west of Lincoln Avenue. It's a very large facility, but this is a regional facility that we have responsibilities for. We have a lot of sump pump discharges that occur throughout the year, several dozen, and we do address these, but we are restrained or constrained by the lack of funding in order to bring storm sewers to the property line to deal with icing on the sidewalks, which is a definite hazard during the wintertime. Here's an example of flooding in backyards, and this happens in many areas of the city. We do have programs to try to help these people with like a rear yard drain or a swale or some other methods that can help, but again, what we can do and the programs we can provide are limited with the funding we have available. The Stormwater program also is a NPDES permit. This is a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. This is the second round of a 5-year permit that we received. You may have recalled about a year ago that we provided those details of that permit. It was a fairly thick document. It has a lot of activities and requirements. Generally speaking, though, the bulk of the activities fall in these major categories of public education, erosion control, public and pollution inspection and prevention, post-discharge stormwater management, changes in operations at municipal facilities, and new enforcement requirements, and then record keeping. All this work takes people and responsibilities, and we are just really stretched with what we can do with the programs that are expected, and we foresee that the requirements under the NPDES Phase 2 requirements are going to get more intense, more involved, especially with respect to dealing with improvement in quality activity in the water qualities. We do public education. Here we have one of our employees showing just like what a manhole is and the television camera, and you can view the internal viewing of a storm sewer pipe. We do have public participations. Brad and Brad are involved with other people in the community to organize boneyard and community cleanup days. Erosion control is something that every construction activity in town, whether it be a single lot, a road project, subdivision developments, individual lot developments in commercial industrial areas, all have to have a stormwater pollution prevention plans, which essentially is an erosion control plan. And there has to be almost weekly visits and documentation. With the limited staff we have, we just can't keep up with those requirements, but these are expectations by the EPA. Street sweeping is certainly an activity we've been doing for decades, but this is a new sweeper we have, and this is a way of cleaning and preventing debris, litter, dirt, et cetera, from going into storm sewers. I'm going to turn it over to Gail now, and he's going to explain to you a little bit about what is a stormwater utility.
Well, that's good. That's a good question. A stormwater utility provides and incorporates a plan to accomplish a long-term stormwater management, and it provides for a mechanism for continually updating and making sure that plan is current. It also provides and defines a funding mechanism to implement and support the plan that's developed by the as a part of the utility. Why should the city consider a stormwater utility? The stormwater utility would allow for implementation of effective stormwater program. It provides a dedicated funding source that would be used strictly for the stormwater program maintenance and administration. It funds mandated state and federal programs. As Bill mentioned, the NPDES Phase 2 regulations were foisted upon the community, and but they didn't bring along any funds, federal funds, to help support it. So we are funding that now ourselves. It provides an equitable fee schedule to implement the programs that make sure it's fair and impartial across the boards, whether it's a single-family resident or a commercial establishment, or what type of fee you're assessing. And it frees up general fund services, funds for other services. If we're not using those funds and having to use those funds to fund a stormwater program, we can use them for other programs. Some communities within the state of Illinois that have stormwater utilities, Rantoul to the north of us has a stormwater utility. Of course, Bloomington and Normal have both adopted stormwater facilities, Morton, Rock Island, and Moline. And several of these communities are very similar in size, population-wise, to the city of Urbana, and some of them have university communities as part of their communities also. There's probably a lot of questions coming in your mind, some key issues that have to deal with. Well, how much will it cost? How will it be paid for? And how will you gain acceptance for this program in the community? Well, one of the first portions of the things you would do for a stormwater utility would do a feasibility study, and you would involve stakeholder groups who will be participants in this program, and they will provide the answers to these questions. Different sources of funding are available to fund a stormwater utility. You can do it out of your general fund, which you're currently funding the stormwater now, and we have limited resources in the general fund. You can do a sales tax to fund a stormwater utility. The City of Champaign uses sales tax monies to fund some of their stormwater improvements. You can do real estate or property tax assessment, a stormwater utility fee. You could do a special service area tax for special service project areas, and you could apply for federal and state grants. There are some grant funds available that could be utilized in some of the implementation of stormwater utilities. What are some of the implementation stages as far as developing a utility? One of the first things you would do would be to do a feasibility study. We would anticipate this would involve a consultant to come in and work with the staff to do a feasibility study. As an integral part of that feasibility study, you would use stakeholder groups to develop the program. These involve neighborhood associations, business organizations, churches, university representatives for sure, and school district representatives, and there's probably many others that would involve in the stakeholder groups. You would meet with key potential ratepayers. If you're dealing with a large commercial establishment or industrial properties, churches, others, university is another potential ratepayer. You meet with those key potential ratepayers and get their input as far as developing the program. Then you would finalize the program goals and financing methods, which would be outlined through the feasibility study. And then after we've agreed on all of the parts above, you would develop and pass a stormwater utility ordinance establishing the utility.
For the next section, I'll cover that, and that's on the consequences of not adequately funding your stormwater program. And unfortunately, the last 2 years, we have many examples of this, especially in some of our surrounding communities. Actually, Urbana has fared pretty well, which is kind of a testament to the generations and administrations before us of making sure that we had the pipes in the ground, they were adequately sized, to reduce damage. But we do have areas in Urbana that do have flooding problems that we do need to address. But some of the problems, obviously, if you have broken and collapsed pipes, that's going to create flooding because water can't get through those pipes. One of the consequences, and we kind of currently experience this now, is it diverts resources away from the sanitary sewer program. Because it is so lowly funded, we kind of end up shifting resources from the sanitary sewer program when we have to be able to cover some of the shortfalls in the stormwater program. If you've got a sinkhole or a broken pipe in the street, it becomes critical to fix that, and you have to find a funding source somehow. We're also looking at, you can cause decreased water quality in local streams if we can't fund those programs to improve water quality. Our local streams and lakes will suffer because of that. It's also difficult to comply with the regulations. Like Bill had mentioned earlier, we're pretty stretched. We are doing a good job as far as meeting the regulations, but we really can't look at doing any improvement based on our current staff and funding levels, and we would like to improve. We'd like to do a better job than what we're doing, but we need some additional resources to be able to do that. And then finally, there's kind of a lack of additional infrastructure being constructed. Most of our money is being focused on trying just to repair the existing infrastructure to keep it working, and unfortunately there are areas of Urbana that there isn't adequate storm sewer. I'm sure some of your local residents have let you know, and I literally keep a list in my office of places that we need to extend storm sewer to or build pipes to that we just don't have those funds available. So that's one of the hardest things to do, is tell people you can't come fix their problem because you just don't have enough money to be able to do that, even though you can go a couple blocks away and they do have that infrastructure in place. So, and I kind of like to finally mention, and it's not on the slide itself, is if you look at some of the sustainability goals and even some of the the LED requirements. A lot of it focuses on stormwater. So stormwater is kind of one way for the city too, if we expand our program, that, we could, work on some sustainability goals and provide, better water quality and improvement to people's lives. So if you want to continue on, these are just some examples of things we see every day when we're out televising the system. I mean, you can see obviously the capacity of that particular pipe is compromised. You've lost 50% of it because of a collapse. That's over on Goodwin and Beach. And I will point out we did repair that one. This one is over at Delaware Street and Busey Avenue. We actually have not had a chance to repair this yet because of the funding reasons. But you can see, I mean, that pipe, I'm not sure how much longer it can hold out, and we obviously need to get in there and do something. Street flooding, this is from the big rainfall event we had in May. You can see that's some pretty serious flooding on Main Street in Hartle. That obviously can stall cars and create hazards for emergency vehicles. You have, Metcad just down the road, so we're not very happy with that, and we're working on trying to rectify that problem. You see some property flooding. This is one of the sites I have on my list that we need to extend the storm sewer, because unfortunately all the water drains to this person's yard, and there's no storm sewer infrastructure to take it anywhere. So they're literally waiting on us to put a pipe in. This example of some of the debris you see in the creek, and our crews do go out and clean this out. But once again, it takes staff time and money to be able to do that. So we're limited in how many times a year we can go in and clean out some of that debris. And this is an example of some more debris we collected over by Bradley and Kohler Avenue. This is upstream of Busey Woods. And this is kind of an example of what we'd like to do on a wider basis in the city. Is this is a structure that was installed to catch the trash before it went into a beautiful natural area, and it's something we'd like to do more. But unfortunately, it's very expensive. I mean, I think that particular structure to catch the trash was like $25,000. So I mean, the infrastructure isn't cheap, but it has good results, and I know the park district's been real happy that we're not polluting Busey Woods as much as we previously were.
So this is again, an overview of really what a stormwater utility is all about. If there's interest in learning more about this, I'd be happy to even have an expert that is going through this process with other communities come in and talk to you to go into more details if you'd like to know more details. But I think as Gail had mentioned earlier in his part of the presentation, that if there is interest to at least look at the feasibility of such a utility, and it would take very much of a commitment of a dozen, 15, 18 people in the community, different areas and different segments of the population, to go through a process of series of meetings, 4, 5, 6 meetings, education, and get feedback, and then come up with a report back to you in a 6 to 12 month time period. This could be done, if so directed. But I think it's important just to sit down and realize that there's a whole lot going on out there when that drop of rain falls, and Brad and Gail do an excellent job, and other staff members do an excellent job, but it's just time we need to be thinking about it, and this may not be the right time for it, but at some point we can't just continue going on how we are with the limited funds that we have available.
Questions? I'll start at this end. Charlie?
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. I've been following a collar community in the Chicago area that's been trying to do this. They've had a lot of pushback, a lot of resistance to what is a very sensible plan based on square footage of what they're draining. So I'm a little concerned about how, clearly you've got to get the stakeholders involved. You've got to get buy-in. So the questions I have are, how do we see that everyone pays their fair share? I mean, I think that's a long-term goal, and school districts are not going to be happy if they've got to pay for their big parking lots. The apartment owners aren't going to be happy if they have to pay for their big parking lots. The churches, so on. But that's the kind of development that has put a lot of pressure on
Correct.
Our systems. Somebody who's put a who's a small household putting in cisterns of various kinds. We're pushing for rainwater collection and rain gardens and that sort of thing. Those are all great ideas. Brad touched on exactly what I'd written about 30 seconds before he said it, which is, what are the sustainability aspects to all of this that we probably really need to address. And so if we go forward with something like this, I see us also changing some of our ordinances on how we build stuff.
Those are certainly outcomes. I know Rock Island has been written up recently through their stormwater utility tax that they have hundreds of rain gardens that they've helped fund on residential properties, for example. So that certainly is, it all is part of this feasibility study and this group as to what do you want to fund, what don't you want to fund. The fairness is extremely important.
It's one thing to do the houses, though, but we have these big parking lots of just solid pavement of one sort or another. They're the ones that really need the what's the word I'm looking for here? Anna, help me, Rosanna. The various detention basins on site, not just but bioswales and some of the more modern developed stuff. And Anna did a nice tour of it, and she's got materials that she brought back. I guess let me just say this, and then you can go on. I'll just say one more thing: is of course we need to replace existing pipe and have funding for it. But I'm not interested in just moving water faster and faster to whatever creek or river that it's going to. I think to sell this to the public, it's what innovative and sustainable programs are we going to be able to do to really improve the quality of water and so on, and really take responsibility for the masses of concrete and asphalt that we put down at the same time.
Well, a strong component, could be using, best management practices to handle just what you're referring to. But again, we really don't have funds available. What I can report is we are the recipient of a $500 grant to, I know, compared to 500,000 or whatever, but to go towards a rain garden, and we're going to use those funds to establish a rain garden at 704 Glover. We happen to have the ideal location where there's a low area, and we're going to be retrofitting and doing some planting, and Brad and our Arbor Division are working on that this year, and when it's done, we'll give you pictures or a little tour or walk by, whatever. But anyway, we're anxious to do it. We've been to a lot of programs over the last 5 years, and I'm kind of tired of sitting there and seeing all this stuff, and we just can't quite implement it. But one point I wanted to make, though, is, stormwater or stormwater utility is a utility every bit as much as a utility as electric is a utility, and gas is a utility, water, sanitary sewer too. It's just been kind of that, out of sight, out of mind, maligned, if you will, to some degree, utility that hasn't received the prominence that others have. But that drop of water does fall on the church parking lot or the apartments parking lot or the University of Illinois parking lot or street or whatever. But it all has to be managed in a certain way. And now, for the last 10 years that we're more into the quality, we kind of dealt with the quantity issue for a long time. We still are. And no, we don't want to rush it downstream or what have you. We can't. We don't want to cause adverse impacts downstream. But we have to deal with the quality issue now more so. And it's kind of like if you step back 34 years ago when treatment plants didn't have a whole lot of regulation and we had rivers you could almost walk across, literally. And, came the EPA and there was things that had to be done, and we're getting to that point with our quality aspect of stormwater. But it's a much more difficult issue to address because of the so many sources of discharge points rather than
as I've watched all the rain come down, I keep wishing for a couple of those 100-gallon cisterns attached to my house. But I can be very supportive of this if it comes with the innovative programs that we're seeing in other communities, be it Rock Island or Portland or whatever. Those are the kinds of things that would help me sell it to my constituents.
Yep. One of the issues and the questions you asked about fairness is if we use a basis of what you contribute, you pay based on what you contribute, and that gets into if you come up with a fee for a residential unit, and then you come up with an equivalent unit that you apply to the industries and everything. It's all on the same basis. One of the things that is really supportive of the sustainability issue is if you can incorporate, and a lot of communities do it, some type of credits. If somebody puts cisterns in, if they do a rain garden, you have to be very careful and establish a formula that's applied fairly, but you can apply credits, which will be an incentive to participate and also gain you some of the quality and quantity controls that you really want to see in the program.
Well, I'll hold off on building my rain garden then until you're ready to help me.
Mayor?
Yeah, this is just a huge problem in this country. It's a worldwide problem, obviously, but now that we're trying to clean up water, I think we need some way of paying for what I agree. It has to be a comprehensive look at how this water is treated. Sure. And I think it'd be something that we definitely have to look into because they're giving us more and more regulations. Thou shalt do this, but there's no money. And we need to have a comprehensive look preventing excessive flowing out of our watershed, because we have the whole issue of are we using up the aquifer. So I think this would be a great way if we could get some funding mechanism and educate the community about the need to look comprehensively at how we're dealing with water.
Yeah, Robert.
Well, thanks for the presentation. It's very interesting. And my question, I guess, deals with how far would you take the feasibility study? I know that they're looking at ways of recirculation of water back into the aquifer, which is another option. There's a lot of technology out there that over and above just putting it through pipes, and putting it back to the rivers or streams. And I know that in that technology, you would be adding back to one of the valuable sources that we have in our area, and that is our aquifer. If we take our studies far enough, I know those pipes probably went in 18. Somebody said a valve on Goodwin Avenue was back in 1950, 40, during the war, and it was made out of cast iron, and it should have been brass, and it finally went kaput. But I think that if they take that study far enough and the feasibility, the sustainable part is really within grasp. And I noticed that the big reservoir that they built in Champaign, and the people were concerned when Neal Street still flooded. And that's probably because of the ancient infrastructure that's there, and you just can't pass that much water through it. So I just kept going out there to see how high the water was going to get. It didn't get very high, even though they went through all the numbers and the meetings and talked about that. But really the infrastructure that's in the ground that you're repairing all the time, there should be a systematic way of upgrading that relative to how much drainage you want to supply.
Well, just a reaction. The feasibility study, basically, what it would provide, whatever programs would provide, would be truly this group's recommendations, thoughts, and then deliberations to the City Council. Every community is different with respect to what it can fund and what it can't fund. And it can be from nothing to millions of dollars and everything in between. It's just a matter of what would you like a utility tax to fund or not fund. But I would say that if you were to say, yes, staff, let's proceed with the next step, and the next step after that being hire a consultant to go through the process of doing a feasibility study and look at that 6 to 12 month window period of time, then I would say at the end of that point would be the juncture of, yes, we like the idea, or no, put it on the shelf, or tweak it, modify it, we want to include this but not that, blah, 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 and then come back with the final numbers type of thing. I think those are your choices.
Well, just the fact that you made this presentation tonight, obviously you're being an advocate, I would say, to create a new utility in the city. And that's a pretty big undertaking. I know that, you know, that we've talked with, and the mayor's been has spoken representatively about, you know, purchasing the water company and providing water to the city. That's another huge utility. I don't know, this is like pretty hefty news to think that we are now going to be trying to channel our drainage water, and that's going to become something that we all receive bills for on a monthly basis, just like our sewer bill. So it takes some serious thought before we want to, you know, impose that on people. I lived for 20 years in an area where there was so little water that you had to pay for the water to come into you. And here we have so much water that, well, not so much, but we get it in such a quantity when it rains in summer that it becomes a problem to diffuse properly. Maybe one can lead to the other. Maybe we can have giant catchment basins from which we can draw or filtered water to then return back into the water system of the city, and, you know, have some of our own recycled water plants here in town. If we are, you know, willing to do that, that could be a huge service to the city and maybe solve two things at once. But it means a lot of infrastructure building. So it sounds like you're ready to have the city council consider, going through the preliminary talks, but then hiring a consultant. And right there we're talking probably about $80,000 or maybe more, I don't know. Maybe you can estimate that, but that's a serious next step.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I think that'd probably be a good middle number to use, but it's probably in the $50,000 to $100,000 range. I mean, just it depends on how much work we want the consultant to do, how much work staff will do. I won't kid you that, yeah, our plates are pretty full. In fact, I chatted with the mayor a little bit about that when she came back today. You know, we don't need a whole lot more projects, but this has been something that internally, along with the finance director, we've talked about for probably 5 years. This sort of thing, and more recently spoke to the mayor about it too, and it's kind of coming of age, and the needs are getting greater because of these permit requirements that are being thrust upon us. I mean, we're doing things almost miraculously that we're doing right now. We haven't added staff at all, and yet we're I don't know how Brad and some of the other people are doing what we're doing, but it's really tough, and I think that if we want to do some of these other things that communities that you hear about are doing, especially in using best management practices, I can tell you that if that's the directive you want us to do now, then I'm going to have to tell you, well, then this isn't going to get done because we just don't have those resources to do. And it's, Brad gave some examples tonight, but there are some folks that, you know, we take the icing on sidewalks, for example. You know, right now, maybe we can do 1 or 2 a year. That's it. The CIP, that's all that the money that's available, a couple, $10,000, $20,000, that's it. So, and we can generate a list tonight of probably 40 such locations. So right there, that's a 20-year program, maybe, to get through that list, because that's just what we're talking about. That's just one example, not to mention backyards and other issues that are going on. So we want to sensitize you that, you know, we do have problems out there, and yes, we've skirted through some of these 2 and 3 and 4 inch rains, but I don't like it when the underpass closes, and I don't like when we close Main Street, and I don't like when we close Washington Street. And maybe it's closure for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, but it's still a closure, you know, and it could be some emergency situation that we're disrupting because those streets are closed. So what am I saying? I guess, yes, this is pretty important. We wouldn't bring it to you if we didn't think so. We want to do it thoughtfully, carefully, and I realize that it seems, and what I'm really sensitive to, even though I'm still bringing it forward, is that there seems to be a lot of entities and agencies and governments asking for more money. And that's the tough part, and I guess ultimately that's, you know, council decision. But I just think it's important to realize that this is something that, you know, needs to be discussed.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with many of the observations tonight, and I just want to say I'm very struck by the thoughtful, planful nature of the steps you would take to form this utility, beginning with a feasibility study, getting stakeholder input, explaining and educating the public, and I hope, and we're talking about forming a utility with broadband, and I hope those same sorts of approaches can be taken so that the community can be educated and understand what the long-term implications are as well. Thank you.
Bill, I wanted to briefly ask if we were to fund adequate maintenance and repairs, but not new expansions of the system, do you have even a rough idea of the annual cost? Right now, we're spending, $370,000. Do you have a rough idea of the annual cost to do the adequate maintenance?
Well, I mean, basic adequate maintenance, we're in essence doing that now. Okay, that $370,000 number, includes money for what it takes to put an operator in a street sweeper and replace that street sweeper every 5 years, for example. Okay, that helps pay a little bit of Brad's salary, for example. There's other funding sources too. So we're getting by right now, and if that's what we want to do, we can continue to get by. But I think the more we televise, the more we clean, the more we inspect sewers, and we do that all the time, fairly diligently, we are uncovering more and more things. And we hate to find them when there's a huge sinkhole and a collapse, because that's the worst way to find it. We like to get it, such as the example Brad gave you of a very poor in Delaware Street,
Delaware,
whatever it was. It's like, Brad comes to my office and says, they take a look at the bill, and it's like, we need to do something soon because I don't know when it's going to go. And if there's a large storm and a lot of surcharging going on and then extra pressure and saturated ground, that may just give way. And then we have a collapse, and then Delaware Street calls and says, hey, what happened? So, and I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but this is just information we have to react on and respond to. So I think kind of my answer to you is $370,000, $400,000, $500,000 will give us a get-by program to continue on. And maybe, and I'm just, a scenario is that after we go through the feasibility plan, we have this stakeholder committee, the recommendation may be, you know what, the utility tax should fund $500,000. And this is what all the parties will pay. And that's a start, and that may be what we want to do. And we go on from there.
From the engineering division's perspective, and I've watched Brad struggle in a reactionary mode to problems, and we're not really able to sit down and plan for improvements other than some occasional lining of an area that's particularly bad and ready to fall apart. And what we would like to see from the design perspective is that we'd like to have the opportunity to do some of these more sustainable things. We'd like to be able to talk to developers about putting in things that would get them credits or improve the quality of water coming out of this. So in order to do that, we think or feel that we would recommend getting some additional funding, and this is one mechanism for doing that that we see.
Mayor?
I think one other comment I would just make is that, keep in mind we have over $100 million asset out there, and we're trying to, keep it going for, $370,000 a year. I mean, it's less than 1%. It's like 0.3% or something. Okay, and yeah, a sewer pipe, they can stay in the ground, 100 years. Okay, but at some point they do have to be addressed. Not to mention the other aspects that we mentioned tonight, besides just the ditch or the pipe that's in the ground.
Mayor?
I think it's really good that we're doing the televising so we pick up the problems before we get some terrible collapse in a sinkhole. How long does it take you to go through the televising of all the pipes? What's your cycle of checking it all?
Because of the crews, what we do is we cycle, and this is what we call systematic cleaning and televising, okay? And we've gone through the sanitary sewers several years ago. We're now maybe halfway through storm sewers. To answer your question, it probably is about anywhere from 5 to 7 years. We rotate back and forth with our systematic cleaning and televising. So sanitary sewers, we're done. Now we're in the middle of systematic storm sewers. So figure 6 or 7 years. Is that, I should really have you answer it.
7 years to go through the storm sewer system. That, I'll point out, that's just cleaning. We actually don't televise the whole system. We don't have enough resources to do that. And it's about 5 years to do the sanitary. But, I mean, that's, part of the problem, too, is we haven't had a look at every pipe in the system. Back in the 80s, Greeley and Hansen did a real comprehensive study of both the sanitary and storm sewer systems, and honestly, we haven't taken or had the resources to do as comprehensive a look as they did since the 80s. So,
Do you do both? Do you do both each year? Some sanitary and some storm sewers?
No, right
Or is there
now-
like a 12-year cycle that one particular, like the corner on my street is only going to get looked at once every 12 years?
This is a generality, but we have 2 Vector trucks that we showed in the slide, and one of them tries to stay with the systematic cleaning. Right now it's storm sewer only. The other one deals with just responses on a day-to-day basis where we may have trouble problems, or we're going to do a street system, resurfacing, whatever, cleaning and televising. So there's 2 trucks out there, but one of them is dedicated to just cleaning, one or the other. Right now we're in the middle of or in storm sewers.
But if they did the storm sewer in front of your house this year, it would be about 12 years before
Yeah.
they would get to it again.
Right, for cleaning.
You're not going to try to sell ads on the televised sewer
If
system,
that would
are you?
generate money, we would think of it. It would put you to sleep pretty fast,
Yeah.
for the most part. Not every graphic is like the one couple clap spices we show. Most of it would put you to sleep in 5 minutes. But
I guess my last comment for you guys, sort of relating to my question about sort of what does it take to adequately maintain it, is that if we do proceed to the feasibility study, that we provide options so that we could decide, well, okay, maybe we really only can stick with doing adequate maintenance for the next few years, but we'll plan to, over the course of a few years, ramp up to a level where we could fund improvements or fund some of the unique sustainability programs. I think it'd be great if we could fund it all right now. It's especially bad timing for payers with the economy, people, the jobs situation, the poverty situation in our city is not good. It's not a good time to say, hey, we're going to create a whole new fee and charge you something every month or every few months. Right now, it's definitely not the time that I would support that, but it's time to start planning. And I'm convinced of the need. I know I've talked to people, and Brad, you and I have emailed recently about a case on East Iowa Street where our alley's flooding and their backyard is flooding, and there's just we don't have any sewer infrastructure near there, and so there's nothing to drain it at all, and there's no funds to build it out, even though it needs to be built. So I understand the need. I think any options in the process that can be provided so that we can see, well, okay, if we do generate $500,000 a year, this is what we could bite off. If we do generate $750,000 or $1 million, what are the different levels at which we could decide as a community we want to make the commitment, and see how much buy-in we can get and how much it would cost different sorts of entities. So thank you for bringing the need to us.
would you be interested in learning more of the feasibility process? Again, we just mentioned the word. We did not really get into a lot of the details there. We could, if that interest is there, I could get into more of those details if there's that interest.
Yeah, Mayor?
Yeah, I was wondering, I mean, could you say what your top priorities would be if you had an extra $100,000 and then maybe an extra $200,000 a year? How would you use that money? What's the best use of that money? Because maybe we know enough now that we could do something.
Well, to be fair, that's part of the reason for a stakeholder group to get involved, because I think getting the full landscape of what's involved, we would like to seek that input from a diverse section of the community to give us that feedback. The three of us could answer that question maybe tonight if we gave us 5 minutes to huddle. I don't think that's what you want to hear. I think you want to hear more for what, community folks would.
I think we need both. Like, because you know what the job is and what needs to be done, and people see the results if it isn't being done. So I think you need information from you on what the possibilities are, what you would use the money for, including creative things about preventing problems. And we need to talk with people, because people, I mean, when I went around campaigning, I had people telling me about their flooding on their street. And so I think it's an issue that people understand.
That's a very extensive part of the feasibility study, is the financial analysis part of it, where staff would look at what we see and what we would recommend would be some initial steps to be taken right away. You get the stakeholders group involved and look at the big, the broader picture of what would be. And you need to find a financial plan, then that goes as part of the feasibility study, and then that tells you what level of funding you need annually for X number of years, and then from that you develop your fee, and your fee structure. So all of that would go into the feasibility study, where the staff would, because of our intimate knowledge of the facilities, would provide that initial, right now this is what we need to do input, and then you add that with that the longer range objectives to the process. So that is looked at pretty extensively while you're looking at the feasibility study.
So if I could do sort of a quick straw poll of the five of us plus the mayor, raise your hand if you're interested in hearing more from staff and professionals about the feasibility study and just what that looks like. Would people like to learn more? Okay, well, okay. Unanimous. So I think you have your answer there, that we'd like to take that step.
Okay, appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next tonight, we have an ordinance. This is about the newspaper rack and the agreement with the artist for design and installation of that project. We have Anna Hochhalter here to tell us about what was in our packet and about the ordinance and the agreement with the artist. Anna?
Good evening. Thank you. I'll begin with some of the background on this project. The Streetscape Committee was discussing how to address the current newspaper racks on Elm and Broadway. They started in, I believe, 2006, discussing what to do with the newspaper racks, which were causing, they were insecure in their installation. They could be causing an impediment to pedestrian and vehicle traffic. They were unattractive. They're not securely fastened, so they fall down. They're not very well maintained, and so that's what really started this project. Additionally, in 2005, the City Council Common Goals, which were set in that year, included the promotion of functional streetscape art. And so we launched this project of connecting an artist-designed solution to the streetscape concern. And so in 2007, we put out a request for proposals from artists who would design an artistic newspaper rack to accommodate the existing, to accommodate 12 racks. Currently, there are 11 racks located on Elm and Broadway. And this is a common challenge that other cities face, where the racks, again, they impede pedestrian traffic, they cause visual clutter and poor maintenance. Some other cities choose to contain them with screening or to replace them with freestanding racks or uniform modular racks, uniform-looking racks, and we attached an exhibit that shows some examples. So we put together a selection committee from the City of Urbana, Urbana Business Association, the Champaign County, the News Gazette, and the Urbana Park District. We have representatives from those entities, and the selection group chose the Urbanistan proposal, which was designed by Frederick Boujard, who is a local Urbana artist. He's here tonight if you have any questions. Maybe wave. Okay. And the committee concluded that the Urbanistan newspaper rack project addressed the streetscape challenges with an elegant design while celebrating local history and complementing the county courthouse aesthetic. So the design is to include historic newspapers from the history, which would highlight the history of Champaign County and Urbana specifically, to be included in this custom design. So after working with the county, a location was identified that meets the safety concerns that Champaign County officials had. You've previously seen the intergovernmental agreement between the city of Urbana and Champaign County for the location of NewsRack on Champaign County property, and that's also been approved by the Champaign County Board. And so what you have seen attached in your packet is the revised and final draft proposed agreement between the city and the artist. You can see the full description of services that the city as well as the artist would provide in Exhibit A of that attachment, which is Exhibit D in your packet. Additionally, we wanted to have an accurate understanding of the cost of materials for the fabrication of the Urbanistan newspaper rack, and so thanks to Pat Poletti with Public Works, staff has met with a group of architects, glass vendors, and glass etching providers to identify exactly the kinds of materials that would need to be used for the fabrication of this customized news rack. And so we have that information. Additionally, some council members have expressed concern about the rise of electronic news media, and I can say that there's still a need to vend and distribute print newspapers. We're seeing in other cities that the vending machines are still there, they're still being distributed, and the news racks on Elm Street and Broadway Avenue continue to be a problem. They continue to be an aesthetic issue and a containment problem in various cities. So if there were to be interest in including an electronic information screen, which is a suggestion posed by Councilman Dennis Roberts, that could be looked into and added onto at a future date. Moving on to the fiscal impact. In the attached agreement, Exhibit D, you can see that we've included the artist fee, design fee to be $11,000, and project materials, construction, and architectural design work would be an additional amount to that. We just recently received a cost estimate from the Architectural Technical Group for those materials that I mentioned, and the total project cost has come in higher than we expected, and that a breakdown of those costs was handed out to you just now by Tom Carino. And so you can see that just for the design services and the construction would be $55,000 approximately, and that's a conservative estimate. In fiscal year 2007-2008, downtown improvement funding of $15,000 was set aside for this project, and that's still available. Also, it's been identified that in downtown improvement streetscape phase 7 item through the TIF District 2, that funding would also be available for these projects. That fund is for accessory related items for streetscape work, such as this kind of a project. So I think that this is we're beginning our movement into the realm of public art and seeing the actual costs of doing site-specific, customized, artist-designed work. And so staff recommends that the Committee of the Whole forward the attached ordinance to the City Council's regular meeting on July 20th with a recommendation for approval. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Any questions for Anna? Dennis?
Maybe it's not going to be a question. Maybe I should hold my comments for general discussion. Okay.
Well, yeah, I guess if there are specific questions first, we can cover all those. Okay, Mayor and then Charlie. Mayor?
Okay, when you said conservative, you mean that this is the high number, not the low number, right?
Correct.
Okay. You expect it could be lower than this?
We would work to make it lower.
Okay, thank you.
And my question extends that a little further, is exactly where is the money coming from? We've got 15,000 set aside. That's still, there's still quite a bit more money to come up with to pay for the rest of this, 50,000 basically. Where is that money coming from? Is that strictly TIF 2?
From downtown improvements, streetscape phase 7 to TIF 2.
And if it weren't being used for this, what would we be using that money for?
I'm going to let Libby answer that one.
Probably like sidewalk upgrades along Broadway Avenue, street lighting, curb bump outs, street furniture, landscaping, things of that nature.
So does this delay some of the work on Broadway that was planned and is needed? Do we have a total picture of everything?
It would delay it, but we do have some design work that needs to be completed on Broadway. We need to complete the design for the Broadway streetscape. And there's some staff limitations.
Dennis and then Diane. Bill, actually, if you had a response to that, chime in.
Just to augment what Libby was saying is just that it's kind of hard to say what is it going to delay, and it's a good question, but I think it not necessarily is it going to delay anything as far as what we planned for this year, but we do have big projects like Boneyard and Broadway and maybe even developments-related incentives or what have you. It's hard to say. So there's money that the TIF 1 and TIF 2 generate every year. There's the money that's in there right now. It doesn't have a real specific project that I'm aware of, other than what's in the capital improvement plan for this year's budget is moving forward with the Boneyard-related projects.
Right, this is Streetscape Phase 7. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Dennis, and then Diane.
Mine. Yeah, I was going to ask specifically about, we were expecting that the TIF money would be a very major part of fulfilling some of the Boneyard plans. You are saying that there's two different line items, but you take money out of, the TIF district is a general fund, and we've broken it down sort of arbitrarily into different line items. I don't believe that they're, how rigid are those items, and how rigid are we prevented from doing crossover expenditure?
No, if you look at your budget, we have budgeted out the Boneyard improvements. And that's not, if the TIF the Streetscape Phase 7 is a separate line item. And we would like to complete the streetscape. There's additional design work that needs to be done, but that's a separate effort from the Boneyard. We're trying to get both accomplished because we believe that both are important. And maybe we're a little bit, in some ways, we're almost done with streetscape. There's just Broadway left to be done. We were waiting, as you recall, on some of the property owners. And maybe it's time now to complete that portion of the streetscape. The streetscape is largely completed other than Broadway. So maybe it's time to complete that. But we do need to retain a landscape architect and an engineer to complete that design. So it's not just off the shelf. And that's something that we will look at. I think there's some discussion internally about when we can start that. This project is, compared to a major infrastructure improvement like streetscape, it's a small percentage. It's not really going to materially impact when we can start the Broadway streetscape and when we can complete it. But it's all one big funding source, and if you recall the presentations that Ryan Breaux made about downtown, we were seeking to balance our commitments to street projects, our commitment to redevelopment downtown for private reinvestment, which is the major reason to do a TIF district, helping businesses, and improving the look of downtown. And I think that this streetscape project is part of that last category, which is the look and the marketing, the spirit of downtown. So it's hard to compare that with like a bridge on Race Street or flood control improvements or some of the aesthetic improvements in the Boneyard. But I do think if you look in your budget, we've done a very good job of accommodating all these different projects.
Diane?
Well, I appreciate very much the time and the thought and the creative effort that's gone into this project, but when I see a price tag of $66,000 for a newspaper stand, I'm just aghast, and there's no way I can face my constituents and explain spending TIF money or any money for this project. It's too big. It's 16 feet wide. It's almost 9 feet tall. There are only about 3 newspapers actually sold on the corner of Broadway and Elm, and a bunch of other things are given away. And I think there are many other ways we could approach this problem of unsightly newspaper stands without spending $66,000. I mean, how can we justify that in these economic times? We just had front page story in yesterday's newspaper detailing the poverty in the county, and yet we're proposing to put this structure next to the county courthouse, and it just seems to me it'll be a symbol of some misplaced priorities. And I was telling Libby I was in Chicago last weekend, and they have some very attractive newspaper stands that are on the corner of Michigan Avenue and in State Street area. They're black, they're wrought iron, they're very, very attractive, much more compact. I think they would fill the same function. Now, they wouldn't be artist designed or custom made, but if you're looking for a way to dispense newspapers in an attractive way that would fit in with the historic nature of downtown Urbana, I think maybe we should look for something that's commercially available, and I just cannot envision spending this much money for what, at the end of the day, dispenses a few newspapers. And I don't think that I really want to build public support for the public arts program, and I'm really worried that this particular project will undermine support for the program. Thank you.
Mayor?
The number that I had in my mind was the 15,000, so, this is more than 4 times as much. And I think we should know what the alternatives are. Could it be something smaller so that the construction costs would be lower, or can we look and see, what does it cost in Chicago? I mean, sometimes Chicago has huge expensive projects too. But, just if you've seen something that looks nice, I think we have an obligation to find out what that would cost. Because I agree that this is, way higher than what we were originally contemplating.
Yeah, Dennis.
Okay, I guess we're in discussion now, so I guess I'm very torn about this project. First I was dubious, but when I saw the artist's work, I thought it was very conceptually interesting, and I could see it as being rather dramatic and a clean way of addressing the problem. And we've worked with the county courthouse and the county board. They passed a resolution supporting it, and I didn't hear them spend any money on it. Maybe that's would have been a great help at this point if they had chipped in $20,000. We may not be so, writhing in our seats at the moment. But it was generous of them to give permission to put the art object on in their driveway of their parking lot. I did bring up the question, and this is like a very significant one, I think. I see, I like the sort of the style and the look of this project, but I could really use this being smaller, and I'm wondering if the artist would consider downsizing. This is rather late in the game to start telling the artist, giving the artist input on a project which is basically vetted, price cost out, and everything else, but I know, we're the people who are going to talk about this because we're going to be buying it. So here we are. I'm also really interested in, because of its placement in a prominent location downtown, to make it really a very useful public art piece. And I'm not satisfied completely with it being a newspaper dispensing rack anymore. I see this as the opportunity to install for the first time, and hopefully we'll have future installations, where we can provide a technologically innovative information kiosk as a part of the design of this project. If we took out one or two of the newspaper dispenser boxes and placed within a enclosed container with a glass face, of similar design in structure and materials, something that housed a something that would accommodate a large screen television, flat screen, or there's new technology that you could perhaps have a digital display screen that's virtually paper thin or cardboard thick. There is technology there that is being used, and if that could become a place where individuals could come to our community and by touching the screen turn it over and find either the MTD route or the downtown city plan, just like the sky map would come up on the screen and you could find out exactly where the furniture gallery was and the clothing store and the artist market locations. And then if you touched it again and you found out the directory for city offices that are located within that block, or the courthouse offices, it would become an information kiosk of great use and adaptability, and it would bring to the downtown something that I've observed, and it was presented at the Main Street conference in Chicago, called the Interactive Downtown. I would like to see this kind of interactive screen being used maybe at 4 or 5 locations in the downtown area to give information that goes beyond what's the daily headline of the newspaper, but real information of use to our community, and could even be a promotional tool. So I would love to see this modified in some manner to provide this new technology as well as perhaps newspapers. But I realize that that would cost more because we're talking about a technology feature as well as perhaps a fiber optic feed to it. But maybe we could take this project and bump it up in its use and its scope, and it could become a more valid arts project downtown. And it could still have very similar look and appeal, perhaps maybe reconfigured, perhaps a little bit smaller. And I know I've talked to people in the university community who are interested in bringing technology out from the depths of the Beckman Institute into the community. And they're very interested in discussions about the very specific projects that might occur. And so I want to work with these creative groups and the city to see if we can perhaps make this project include something of this high quality technology, and make a prototype that maybe we'll have a few of these. Now I'm thinking already we have at the MTD stations, we have computer activated information about when the bus is about to arrive. And it's very useful for people who are waiting to know that the green bus is going to come in 4 minutes, or 2.5 minutes, the yellow bus will be at their corner. So if we could make this kiosk as informative about a variety of information using modern technology, which is available to us, I would support it, and I would support the high cost if this was included. And I guess those are my conditions almost of how to go forward with this project. And I don't, as a person who's been an artist also, and I'm sensitive to being, governmental groups redirecting art. However, we're paying for it, and it's supposed to be this is a functional piece of installation. It's not really a totally aesthetic piece. So let's see if we can, without really changing it very much, make it yet more functional and even more, and make it so cutting edge that it would actually initiate a kind of a new energy for the downtown, a new approach to how Urbana gives its information about itself to people who arrive in our town. I could imagine that if, again, touching the screen, you could call up my favorite topic, the Royer Arts and Architectural District, and find out where on the street, the 17 or 14 buildings in the downtown that Royer designed are located, and you could then turn around and look for them. I mean, you could find out what's being offered at the farmers market this coming weekend, or what's playing at the Station Theater. I mean, this could be, this could almost be like an interactive computer terminal, but it would have to have some control. Maybe it'd be operated by a cell phone, or there would be a directory that would assist you to do this. I know the technology is out there, and there are people on the campus who are trying to actually look up some of this information for us now. So my suggestion would be to kind of just hold off for a bit and maybe try to rethink this slightly and see if the artist would be willing to perhaps reconfigure it slightly based on what we find out about the new technology and how it can be employed. It's a lot to ask. Okay, that's what I'm asking.
Sounds like a completely different project that maybe needs to be inside. An information kiosk is really different from a newspaper vending rack. To try to merge the two ideas really makes it a different project. So, but I think you know that.
Well, I mean, I only see it as being different because one of the boxes now takes a different shape and has a different function. I don't see it being redesigned necessarily, significantly, but there would have to be, a little bit of hardware added for. I mean, I'm just saying that this is what I would see.
Yeah.
So thank you for your patience.
I had a couple questions for staff, Anna and Libby. One was, I'm a supporter of the project, and at the same time, I also, like you, was surprised the cost came back so much higher than we planned on. Have you been able to ask the people who gave us the cost estimates for construction what exactly about the project costs so much more and what could be done to deliver the project within the original budget? In other words, when I've gotten bids for things, and the bid comes back higher, I'll say, oh, well, we were planning on a budget like this. Can you tell me what it was that cost so much more? And they could say, oh, well, the difficulty is structurally it takes really big bolts to make it withstand the wind or something. And then you could talk about alternatives like bracing it in a different way or slight alterations to the design or the structure of it that somehow would eliminate whatever it is that drove this cost up. Because certainly just etched glass of that size is less, and some of the metal pieces, but I'm sure there are reasons why they said to do this thing right, it would have to be that cost. So I wonder if you've had some of those conversations with the people who gave us the estimates, or if you haven't, if you'd be willing to try to see what are their recommendations for the alternatives, whether it's a change in the size or a change in how it's braced or structured to deliver the project within the budget we all planned for.
We received the cost estimate fairly late last week and weren't able to have an in-depth conversation with them on exactly the breakdown of the costs, but I'm sure that they'd be willing to speak with us to try to find a solution that was of a lower cost. I will say that we had in our initial technical meeting, we talked about various kinds of bracing solutions and the kinds of glass, the kinds of color of the glass, the kinds of etching. It's fairly specialized. You want to make sure it will withstand vandalism and wind, and it needs to support the racks. I mean, it's a sizable piece, and the materials are of high quality. So I think those all play a part.
The part that's been budgeted so far, we're really not based even on a preliminary cost estimate. Those were funds that we accumulated. So there really wasn't a comparison. I think we knew about the design fee from the beginning, the $11,000. And I think to some extent, public works projects are costly. They just are. They need to be out in the elements. This is a quality project and quality materials. We want it to be safe. We want it to sustain. That's why we're getting the additional design services from an architect and an engineer that adds to the cost, that adds to the soft costs. So we have 30%, if you will, in soft costs. And we'll certainly look at maybe different dimensions that might save on the cost, or we could ask for a more precise cost estimate and try to get it to a different level. But public works projects cost money, and when they have that added design features, that I think that adds to it. So I don't think, I think that's part of the problem is just the very nature of what we're doing. So I just wanted to clarify that about the $15,000.
I guess I had one other comment to just contribute to the council's discussion, which is just that, I am sensitive, Diane, to your point that I'm a big supporter of the public arts program. This project came in higher than the budget we'd been planning for, and I definitely don't want it to frustrate people, and make them think the whole program is similarly costing more than we thought it would or anything. To me, what I like so much about the public arts program is actually the way we have citizen committees making decisions, and so we aren't as council deciding it should be red or blue or big or small. And I'm a little worried that it's late. I mean, kind of like what you said, these are good questions to ask, and at the same time it's hard because there's already a design. For us to jump in and say at the 11th hour to change the design is tough. And so I'm glad with the rest of the public arts program that we have citizens committees to do it. We have budgets. We see the full budget for a project. We evaluate it and score it, and we chose a great list of projects, and I'm really excited about them. This one, I think it's hard, and I think it will be hard to accommodate the electronic aspect in it too. Something electronic that would be weathered in the elements and be outdoors would be difficult to engineer into this. So I guess I'm wondering a little bit of maybe direction and sort of straw polls from people here in the group. Do people generally feel like, maybe I want to see a show of hands for two different general questions. Do people feel like tonight we should send this to council? Or that would be the first raise your hand. The second raise your hand would be, do you feel like we should send questions back to staff and ask staff to come back with some more answers the subsequent week? So first, raise your hand if you think you'd like to send this one to council. Okay, one. Yeah, I might be two maybe.
Approving.
Yeah.
Going forward.
And raise your hand if you'd like to give a list of questions to staff, have them try to bring answers back to us. Okay, two hands. That wasn't, not everybody voted, I guess. So what I'd like to hear is questions that you have for staff then. The question I wanted to throw into the pot was, what possible changes to the project or to the engineering or structure might be possible to do it within budget. Are there any other questions from council members that you'd want to throw into the pot to consider how we could proceed? Diane?
I'm not clear what the budget is. How much was budgeted?
That one Libby can answer.
Roughly. We have $15,000 already allocated for this project or one like it from prior years. We have about $100,000 to my recollection in that streetscape line item that this would be eligible to be supplemented from. So this would be could be taking a sizable portion of that. It's about $100,000 in streetscape phase 7 for things like street furniture, street lights, sidewalk improvements, improving this part of the downtown, aesthetic improvements.
Okay, so we didn't start out with, here's the amount of money you have to work with. It was just an open-ended thing.
This was an early on idea that we had for public art, and I think
Yeah.
we've, learned a lot perhaps since. This was an early on idea that's taken some time to get the approval with the county. So we didn't tackle the cost question until fairly late in the game. And it was a little bit surprising, but we thought we were accumulating sufficient funds, plus knowing that this was something that we would be able to bring for further allocations. But, the funds are there and eligible from that line item to more than cover this project if the council should choose to do that.
Yeah, do Charlie.
Yeah, I guess I'm still waiting for the Moody project that's supposed to appear here next to the city building that's been ongoing for 20 years. That's, when the city's gotten involved in these public arts projects, they just haven't come to fruition. It's a bit frustrating to see this happen a second time. But from the gist of the questions I was asking earlier, I think it's pretty clear from that I'm coming at this from what's the total scope of Broadway, which we've been also wanting to get done for some time, and this takes money away from that, getting that project done. And unless I can see a budget that gets Broadway done completely as it needs to be, I can't support moving forward on a project of this magnitude.
So would your specific question for staff be, tell me if I got this right, the question would be, what will the Broadway design, the landscape architecture cost, and what would the Broadway construction cost roughly, just so we could
It is
know
separate, yeah.
how this fits into the picture of the rest of the streetscape phase
I'm
7?
not regretting not having a complete copy of this downloaded of the budget downloaded on the computer here, so I can look at it. Bill and Tom have answers, I think.
Okay, Bill?
Yeah, this will not delay Broadway in any fashion at all. In the CIP on page 24, TIF 1 is funding at $750,000, and TIF 2 is funding at $250,000. So there's $1 million available for Broadway Avenue improvements. This does not impact that project.
It's a separate line item.
But you were saying that this impacts benches, lighting, or
There's a line item called Downtown Streetscape, Downtown Improvements Phase 7. And do you recall what Phase 7 all encompassed?
No, there's $100,000 available for public art, as Libby mentioned.
that's different from $1 million for...
This does not impact Broadway. This does not impact the Boneyard.
And so, Charlie, just I want to make sure that we get your question either answered tonight or specifically down to staff so they can bring us back an answer. Your question is basically what line is the $100,000 coming from, and what if it didn't go to this project?
Right.
What we would spend it on?
What would we spend it on? Yeah, we have $100,000. How would we spend it, and what would the total impact be on downtown?
Okay.
We'll respond, and I'm sorry if I confused, but here's an email from Doug Miller, who tracks this for us. Downtown Improvements Streetscape Phase 7, which was intended for various streetscape work and other related items such as benches, bike racks, etc. And that might be all we know about it.
So, okay, so that's something we could get more answers on. Is exactly, yeah. If we had the 100,000 planned to go for any other pieces to finish out streetscape. Okay, Bill?
I hate to say this, but it's ill-defined.
Okay.
The best answer is the answer you just got. Okay, it's like a placeholder for money for projects that come up that's available to us, and this is one of them. It's not project-specific.
So
we had $35,000 left for benches, street lighting,
replacement or what have you. Yes.
Okay, Dennis, your hand was next, and then Diane. Dennis?
And so, maybe what I would suggest is we bring this back and have a conversation with more information. We're getting more information now. But it would be also helpful to see, in comparison by cost, how does this relate to a bench or a streetlight, i.e. some other aspect of the downtown streetscape. In comparison to putting a streetlight in, this might be a bargain, and we should just get it. Or if this is compared to 2 or 3 benches, is that a thought? Okay, just to see what we're getting for the cost. For $66,000.
Yeah, we've actually started gathering data on other news racks from other communities, and we can get some other comparables, street bump outs, benches, concrete pads, things that have structural elements. I think that's a good.
If it's worth 2 benches, well, maybe it's worth it. If it's worth, I don't know. Let's see.
I hope more benches than that, but.
Okay. And then Diane, I think your hand was up next.
I think I'll wait.
Okay. Okay, yep, we have other topics. So I think that the consensus is we have some questions here that were sort of summarized to you, the comparables question, the what else could the $100,000 go for, and my question of the what ways could the scope be reduced. We will let you all work on that and put it back on the agenda when you feel like you've had time to follow up with folks and answer questions. Is there anything else from council members before we move on tonight on this topic? Okay, thank you, everybody. I know this is one that people have put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next tonight, we have a series of community development items, and then our very last item after that I know some people are still waiting for is the commercial recycling item.
Brendan?
Yes,
I'm
Charlie.
going to, after John's report here, I'm going to basically suggest an omnibus of the whole thing since they are all identical.
Okay. I think that they are all very similar, and that's definitely in order. They also sort of come in groups, the similar
the Chodos
programs,
and
all the public facilities or public improvements are all together. All the Chodo operatings are together. So, John, why don't you tell us what we've got here?
Okay, the first 3 items are, actually, all these items are for enactment of our annual action plan for fiscal year 2009-2010, and also included our supportive housing for homeless and families in transition program. The first 3 items, A, B, and C, are for, I take that back, the first 2 items are for our public facilities grant agreements. The next 3 items are CDBG. These are both CDBG funded. CDBG public service agreements that funding is going to be combined with city funds and township funds for those 3 agreements. The next 3 items are the supportive housing program for the homeless and families in transition. That would be items F, G, and H. Then the next 2 items are the Ecolab and Homestead Chodo operating agreements to provide operating funds for community housing development organizations. And the final 3 items are Chodo developer agreements with 1 with Homestead and 2 with Ecolab. And we have representatives of every organization here, and we thank them for their patience this evening, with the exception of Family Service of Champaign County and Ecolab, who both had conflicts with this meeting tonight. If you have any questions.
Any questions? Charlie?
I'd actually like to know if anyone in the audience, after having sat here so patiently through all this, has any additional information they want to provide us at this time. I just want us to get it done, right? Yeah, nodding. I want to send the whole batch, A through M, to council with a recommendation for approval.
Is there a second? I'll second that. Okay. Moved and seconded. Seconded again by Robert. Any questions about these items, A through M? None? Okay. All those in favor of sending A through M, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. We will see those items next week at City Council. Thank you. I know the the 2 inches of paperwork got done the quickest tonight, and the discussion items took hours.
Well,
So
the 2 inches of paperwork we need to figure out a way to reduce that down to electron, that's the kind of thing that should just be electronic and nothing else.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it
We
is,
don't
a
need
lot
to
of it
print
is
those
similar.
out.
Okay, our last item this evening is another discussion about a potential program. This is the Business and Commercial Recycling Program. There was a brief memo, and so tonight we've got Rod Fletcher and Bill Gray and one other guest whose name I don't know.
Courtney.
Oh, Courtney. I finally get to meet Courtney. Welcome.
I'd like to introduce Courtney. Courtney's our recycling coordinator and the person that makes the U-Cycle program go.
Yes, welcome.
We put our heads together a little bit after the June 22nd meeting. I have to say that some of us have had a variety of other commitments, vacations and such, so we didn't have a whole lot of time to give this a whole lot of thought. But kind of what we provided was more or less a stream of conscience of just thoughts that came to us, more or less reacting to the idea. I think the key that we gathered was how can we provide such services to those businesses that maybe don't have the opportunity to recycle through their landlord, the unavailability of a hauler or convenience or whatnot, or just too high a cost. And I think the key that's struck us in the resolution was voluntary. I think in the past, a lot of our discussions focused a little bit more on mandatory, whether it be mandatory on the hauler or mandatory on the owner. So this has put a different light, if you will, or aha, as I heard correctly before. And what we just kind of thought was we just jotted down a little bit of our thoughts as to what would it take to pursue this idea further. And just to go through the memo just very briefly, we figured there's a variety of information that would need to be gathered. And I think just literally just where are all the business locations, and it would just take a fair amount of effort, but just to identify that. And also then is how many are already being served by a contractor. It'd be good information to have. And then determine what business accessibility for the 95-yard gallon toter or 2 cubic yard dumpsters for recycling cardboard, locating recycling toters near garbage dumpsters. There are some logistic issues that are somewhat of a constraint that would have to be worked out as this program would go on. We do have 2 contracts. We've had some preliminary discussions with them. I think both have expressed a willingness or an interest to explore such a program or respond to an RFP if that were to be the case. And just as a point of information, the residential contracts are expiring in less than 2 years now, 2011. Then factors of costs, just some basic information of what's collected already. I think you mostly know that. We would certainly need to know the number of stops and toters and dumpsters that would be utilized at business locations, so that do we have enough toters, would we have to order more, that sort of thing. A point of information is that the 95-gallon toter costs the city in our contract with Allied, that's $11.50 a month, just as a point of reference. And also, I think homeowners, apartment units do pay $2.50 per month to the city for the service. Some suggestions we have is we think that the opportunity should be made available to all businesses, at least for those businesses that don't have recycling available to them now. Presumably the fee to pay for the program would only apply to those businesses that participate. As you heard tonight, a contractor is providing services, Matt's business, so this is not, as at least we envision it, something to tread on his turf or the programs he's providing, but to look at those businesses that don't currently recycle. We'd want to prepare a request for proposal to those qualified contractors. We'd want to solicit businesses then through direct mails and other means. Once we have that sort of information and more details as to how such a program would work, again, it would be voluntary. Of course, defining the scope and final price and contract adjustments would be final. Again, this is real rough ballpark, but we think that something like this could be implemented in the next 12 months. We believe that that sort of timeline, or maybe even a little sooner, is a doable situation. So we're looking for feedback, direction. Where do we want to go from here? Rod and Courtney and I would like to try to help implement such a program.
Okay, we'll start at this end and work our way down. Charlie.
Okay, well, thank you. Finally beginning to see something that might work. And I wish I'd had the aha moment 3 years ago when we put this in city goals to expand, into business recycling. I guess my initial reaction to this was, yes, we want to get all this information. The total plan can be answered with this, but the flip side of that was that I was looking for a much simpler solution, which is sort of a self-subscription system based on what businesses are out there and what they themselves see. And it comes back to, okay, my basic question is, okay, if you have a new house that gets built, a residential house, how do they get added to our recycling system? Somebody calls up and says, my house is completed in this new subdivision or whatever, how do I turn on recycling services? I've just completed this apartment building, how do I turn on recycling services? Okay, so what is your mechanism for dealing with those two scenarios now?
Well, both scenarios, we just simply get their name, address, and we deliver the information and get the programs and the toters out there to them.
And a bill starts.
And we add them right. We add them to
and
our
a bill
billing
goes.
system
Okay.
at that point in time. But I think it's important. When I had discussions with both ABC and Allied, their first reaction was, yes, we would be interested in doing this. We have certain collection capacities that we could do this, but we need to define the scope of the project. Are we talking adding 50 small businesses? Are we talking 500? Because that impacts their operations to some degree. And as Bill alluded, we also need to know if we in fact are going to be providing toters or containers, we need to know what our inventories are so we can make that happen. Are we going to, for instance, we have about 350 or so toters left for our multifamily program that we would presumably utilize in implementing a program like this. If we have 500 businesses that are interested, well, we need some upfront time to make arrangements and make orders and get that in place.
Okay. So I'm beginning to see the other side now. Okay.
So,
yeah, because I'm thinking of just that, that random business out there that just, is already currently taking advantage of one of our programs, and how do we let them formally enter into the program? And so, so if we could get to all these other questions, but at the same time we could add a handful of businesses that are already
I suspect
recycling.
That's already occurring.
Okay, well, yeah, they're already doing
They're
it.
already small businesses, and we know that for a fact. We sent out our survey several years ago. We hate to see this stuff being thrown away, so we take it home, put it in our recycle program. So we know that's happening.
Well, I know. Well, I know. More than one business is out there just putting stuff on the curb, and it's getting picked up.
Right.
Okay, and I stop and think about, okay, so the trucks, the residential trucks going right by my business, and if I do it right, I can get my bin picked up. What's the difference between the toter that I have at home and the toter you provide for apartment?
30 gallons.
30 gallon
capacity.
So okay, so I've got a 30-gallon toter, right?
64.
Or what is it? 60?
64 and 95.
64 and 95. Okay, so I pay $250 a month for a 64-gallon toter then, or whatever I manage to put out there on the curb with whatever bins I've got. Okay, so that's good to understand. So I would be very interested in pursuing this as you've described it, but at the same time, if there's a small business out there that's currently participating in some fashion, I'd love to let them participate more officially. See what I'm saying? You know, and I would imagine it's just a handful.
Okay, the program is paid for by mandatory tax imposed upon all property owners, residential property owners. The question is, that we'd have to overcome is if we're going to make this available to small businesses, we need to Council clearly has made the point that we want to expand recycling wherever we want and can possibly do that. I think now's the opportunity to send an RFP, define the scope of how many businesses would be interested, define our costs for that, so that we can then send out letters to the businesses and say, we can provide you this service for this cost. Are you interested to participate? From there, we can establish a list of businesses that we can then delegate and negotiate contracts for, respectively, to whether we should add it on a residential program or a multifamily program. That will also take a change in our ordinance to some degree to require those businesses that participate in our program to pay that fee.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, I know I've got two businesses right now based on, you know, they're stepping forward and talking to me privately that are ready to pay, you know, and put out their small bins or their 64-gallon toter and pay the $250 a month. Okay, that's what I'm saying.
Well, we don't know that it's going to be that $250.
Yeah.
For sure. Right now, until we send out an RFP and try to define that a little bit more. It could be $250, it could be $350, it could be $450. That's my point, is we need to define the scope.
Mm-hmm.
Are we just talking about adding a handful of people on there? Then yeah, that cost may be that. Is it going to be overwhelming, 500 customers out there? Well, that takes a little more thought and effort.
Well, we can wish for the latter, but I expect it's the former.
I do. But I need, for those businesses to make that decision, they need to know how much it's going to cost them.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know what it's going to cost them.
Yeah, I see. I guess, the way I'm thinking, it's, the small business is putting out that small bin or the small toter, it's $250 a month. That's just an extension of the current program.
No. We're adding a completely different sector to the residential program. And we need to apply the same rules and regulations. We need to have legal come and give us advice of how that funding is going to happen. Because we open the door then for those people in the residential program, you recall, we have mandatory recycling tax for all our residents. We have the ability to expand that to some degree for our small businesses that are out there. We need to figure out what that mechanism is going to be.
Okay, well, if you can tell me I'll have a program, if you can tell me we'll have a program, what is it you say, January of next year? Let's see, November, yeah, January 2010, that's good enough for me. I mean, I'll buy that, okay? I just wanted to, make any attempt I could to formalize the informal approach that's out there possible, but if I can have this January 2010, if the council can have this in January 2010, that would be great.
Okay. Here's a question for you all. I mean, I guess the two businesses, Charlie, that Charlie's speaking about are already maybe doing this and putting out a toter and it's getting picked up because they're in a residential neighborhood. Between the time we've talked about it today and we implement a full business recycling program, we're not going to crack down on those two businesses or spend our time trying to get them not to recycle.
No,
that's counter to the whole thing, right?
That's fine.
So I guess, I understand that, yeah, those two businesses, whatever, if they're doing that and it's working today, we're not going to spend time cracking down on them. But I understand staff's point that if we're going to market this to all businesses, and if our true goal really is to get 700 businesses to begin recycling, okay, then we need to step into it with enough thought to talk about what's the quantity and what's the cost. And I'm okay with that. And the people who are doing it already aren't going to be stopped from doing it. Right. We're not going to collect their $250, but, we'll get $2.50 from some other parking meter or something to cover it. Yeah,
Paper clips.
the paper clips. If we can stop the paper clips, we'll get $250 from that meter. So I guess if those people that are doing it aren't going to get cut off, then this is the program that lets us scale it, which is something I'm totally excited about. Do other council members have questions or discussion on this one? Okay, yeah, Robert, we'll keep going this direction, Robert. Charlie, do you have a quick response?
No, I just want to move
Okay.
a committee of the whole motion to proceed with the above recommendations and timelines.
Is there a second? Okay, seconded by Diane. Let's continue if there's any more comments. I didn't get this direction yet. Dennis?
Well, if you have a row of businesses and they're going to be putting their recycling out in the alley, and every other one decides to pay for it, and every other one doesn't, but of course uses the bins anyways. I mean, I don't know about the regulation and the accountability for the bins. Is there any kind of, I guess we're all trying to be fair, and I guess that anybody can put trash in anybody else's canister, they're not looking anyway. It's sort of like how things work. And of course, we're happy to pick up trash and we're happy to recycle, but I don't know if there's any functionality. You're trying to apply fees to the program. It might be something people would like to take advantage of and yet find ways of not paying the fee. I'm just going to be, asking these questions because things can happen and things don't always go the way you think they will. I don't know you might think about, can you get all the people on a block to agree to something and then just put 2 bins out and fill them occasionally? I don't know what kind of group scenarios you can find or if it makes any sense to worry about it. Maybe just let life be the way it is.
Yeah. Any particular responses to?
Probably not.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, the motion is to send, to direct staff actually to proceed, not to send this to council, to just direct staff to proceed. Are there any other questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion carries. You have direction.
We got the green light.
Yep, thank you. Seeing no further business, we have one question from the mayor. Go ahead.
Oh, right, yes.
On the 20th, I would like to know when you would like to start.
Either before. Do we really want to start before as opposed to after a short council meeting?
Is it very short council meeting?
If it's short, you're saying based on these items that were sent.
Last time we did it afterwards based on, the fact that we basically timed it after short meetings so that we basically got out of here by 9.
But we have to say an agenda when
Right.
it starts.
Yes.
That's the hard part.
Yeah, it'll start following the.
Approximately 8 o'clock.
Have to have, okay, right.
Last time, that's how we did it last time. We went, that the caucus meeting, for the purpose of setting.
Sandwiches and stuff.
That was, we did meet a couple of times beforehand when we can do it both ways. It's up to you.
What's your choice
Just-
for Monday then? Afterwards?
Monday, the 20th. Do people have any strong preferences? Afterwards, before? Okay, quick show of hands. Would you prefer to do this before and come at 5:30? Before. Okay. Anybody prefer to do it afterwards?
Well,
If
that's
it's-
one of the reasons you start earlier, because then you can force it to be only an hour.
Yeah.
If you start at 5:30 or something.
If we don't finish talking, we can always meet again, right?
Well, the
we
idea
don't
was,
finish.
the idea was
Yeah.
to meet, we'll meet at least 3 times. It took 3 or 4 times, it took 4 or 5 times last time. This time it
Talking
should
about
go.
the goals?
Yes, so
Oh,
it
it
goes.
took longer than that.
Yeah, it took 5 or 6, so this time it
Okay.
should go a lot faster. I think
Okay.
we have.
Before.
Before?
What, sandwiches
Before?
at 5:30?
We should have sandwiches at 5:15 and start meeting at 5:30.
Okay.
5:15. We'll see you all Monday at 5:15. Thank you all. This meeting is adjourned.